Are you sick of tutorials that promise real-time features but deliver real-world headaches? You watch a video and get hyped about building the next big thing, but when you try to make it work in your project, you just get bugs, errors, and frustration. Those days are gone. In this course, you'll build and deploy LiveDocs, an improved version of Google Docs that manages millions of collaborators in real time. With a secure authentication flow, full Markdown editor, complete document management where you can create, edit, save, and delete documents, real-time nested comments with tagging, emojis, and complete crowd functionalities for engaging discussions, floating comments, live cursors that show you exactly what your collaborators are working on, instant notifications to keep everyone in the loop, flexible sharing options such as inviting editors and viewers or revoking their access, native-like, fully responsive design that works flawlessly on any device. And all of this while learning Next.js with server-side rendering, nested layouts, server actions, and revalidation, TypeScript for type-safe code, Lexical, which is a powerful editor developed by Meta, ShadCN, and Tailwind CSS for a modern, completely mobile responsive UI, Clerk for hassle-free auth that transforms weeks of building out your own authentication into minutes of integration, giving you a fully customized system without the headache, and Sentry, a monitoring software for analyzing performance to ensure your app is enterprise ready. Now with even better teaching methods, where you'll get an open source code base you can look at if you get stuck, a custom Figma design so you know exactly what you're building, and a Discord server to get all your bugs resolved. All those things are free, so grab those from the links below while I continue telling you more about the app. And this isn't just your average tutorial. You'll build a real-world, real-time web app and feel confident enough to create any kind of truly dynamic, responsive, and collaborative experience with Liveblocks, the shortcut to adding these real-time features into your app. What would typically take months to build from scratch, you'll implement in hours. It's so robust that even Vercel, the platform powering Next.js, chose it for their live stream to improve engagement through live reactions. Oh, and all the software we'll use in this course, like Liveblocks, ShadCN, Tailwind, Clerk, and more, is completely free too. No credit card required, so you can follow along with the entire course from anywhere in the world. A basic to medium understanding of React or Next.js is needed, so if you're not there yet, check out my Next.js crash course and come right back. With that said, here's a full demo to show you precisely what you'll build. Let's kick things off by creating our account. You'll see right away that this layout looks quite different from what you're used to with Clerk. They rolled out some cool new features, offering more ways to log in, like face detection and even AI authentication. After successfully creating your account, you'll land on a sleek, minimalistic home screen where you can begin creating documents. So let's go ahead and create one. And we're in. There's so many editing options to choose from headings and bold italics to alignments. And adding more options is super easy too. You can type anything you need, style it, and then to the right, there's a section for adding comments. If you spot a typo or two, or just want to provide feedback, simply select the text and add a comment right there. It works exactly like the commenting feature in Google Docs. Hover over it, and you'll see a floating comment. You can edit, delete, or add additional nested comments here. You can also tag other people or add emojis. We have a notification system at the top. Whenever you tag someone, they'll get an instant notification so they can join right away. Well, let's give that a shot. I've been mentioning these real-time features quite a lot. So here we go. I'll split the screen into two and log in with a different account. Now, on my first account, I'll grant access to my other account as an editor. And if you look at the other part of the screen, you'll immediately see the notification about it. And now, the other user has arrived. I can't type on two screens simultaneously, but hey, look at that active collaborator. They're editing the same document as you with their cursor waving around to show exactly what they're up to. And if they're causing any trouble, you've got the power to revoke their access. Your call. Next, you can change the document title, and once saved and back at the home screen, changes are reflected instantly. You can create as many real-time documents as you need and share them with other users and collaborators. And of course, everything is fully responsive. including the editor screen, making it super easy to use it on your phone without any issues. So, I hope you're excited to learn a ton, build this app, and use it as an example of a real-world problem you've experienced and decided to solve with your programming skills. Trust me, recruiters and hiring managers love that. I'm super excited to dive into the code with you. So, enough talk, fingers on the keyboard, and time to write some code. To get started building a great collaborative application, let's start from bare beginnings by creating a new empty folder on our desktop. I'll call it JSM_live_docs, which is the name of our application, and then drag and drop it into your code editor. Once you're here, we can initialize the project. To develop our great Liveblocks, we'll be using React as the best library for web interfaces. And of course, we'll power it up with Next.js, the go-to React framework for the web. To style our applications, we'll use Tailwind CSS that's packed with utility classes like flex, paddings, and centers to provide completely customized but quick styling across our application. And we'll power up our styling with ShadCN, which comes with a lot of beautifully designed components that you can copy and paste into your apps and then style however you want. To enable live collaborative features like comments, notifications, text editors, and real-time APIs, we'll use Liveblocks. And what an amazing job they've done with their recent landing page. You can move these 3D elements in real time with other people checking out the website too. Crazy stuff, you'll love it. Later on, we'll also add Clerk, the go-to authentication for modern Next.js applications. And to make our application enterprise ready, we'll also implement Sentry, an application monitoring software considered not too bad by 4 million developers. I gotta mention that all of these tools are completely free to use. Moving forward, at every single point in time when you're watching this video, I want you to know what you're doing and not just follow along blindly. So that's why I prepared a complete Figma design for you. Here, you'll be able to see exactly what we're building. And who knows, maybe you can pause the video a bit, give yourself a challenge, and code some of these things on your own to truly learn how to think like a developer and implement collaborative features. You can get access to this Figma design by clicking the link down in the description. So without any further ado, let's get started with initializing our app. Since we'll be using ShadCN, we can go to their website, click Get Started, and head over to Installation and Next.js. We'll use their installation process, and then we'll keep adding more stuff as we go. So let's copy this initial command, open up the terminal, and paste it with a slight modification. Since we have already created a folder, we don't have to specify a folder name such as my app. We can just say // to create it in the current repository and press enter. It's gonna ask us a couple of questions, whether we want to install create next app. So we can say why, please do. We will not be using source directory. We will be using the latest app router. We don't need to customize the default import alias. And with those questions out of the way, all of the dependencies needed to run the base of our application are getting installed. So wait until that is done, and I'll be right back. Once it installs, we can check out the second step. So let's copy the second command to initialize ShadCN. Paste it right here and press enter. It'll also ask us a couple of questions, such as the style which we prefer, the color, and then in this case, we'll say no for CSS variables. I'll show you a different way of coloring the elements. That's it. The dependencies have been installed. What do we have to do next? Oh, we have to establish some of the fonts. So let's copy this entire root layout from here, and let's head over to app layout.tsx. And if something's looking a bit weird, well, that's because I moved my sidebar to the right side. You can do the same by right-clicking it and say move primary sidebar to right or left, no matter what you prefer, either way is okay. And now we can simply override our existing layout.tsx. We can modify this TypeScript property by simply saying that children is of a type React node. Now let's see what the next step is. We can configure the theme font family in the tailwind.config.js file. So let's copy this part right here, go over to tailwind.config.ts, And then right here, go under extend, and you can just add font family right here. And you'll have to import the font family from Tailwind CSS default theme. So we can do that right here at the top. Great. Next, we can see the app structure. So whenever you add new Shadcn components, they'll be added to the UI folder. I'll show you exactly how that looks like later on. For now, we can simply add our first Shadcn component to see whether it works. Let's copy the installation, paste it in the terminal, npx Shadcn UI latest add button, and then we can simply import the button and use it within our code. What I love about Shadcn is that it only installs the components that you want to have, such as the button in this case. Great. Now let's go over to page.tsx. Let's remove everything that we have here and just run RAFCE. This is a shortcut to create a React arrow function component, which we can call simply home. Within this home, we can create a new button, and we can automatically import it from components, UI button. This is the one that was created for us by Shadcn. So let's quickly go back to layout.tsx to check if everything is good. I think we'll have to fix these styles at the top as we have just imported this over from Shadcn, but we don't really have those styles here, so let's remove them. And instead, we can simply say import /globals.css. Great. And while we're here, let's also fix up our metadata by saying export const metadata of a type metadata coming from Next. It's going to be an object that'll have a title of LiveDocs, which is the name of our collaborative application, and a description, something like your go-to collaborative editor. Let's also remove this head from here, and let's make sure we return the children. So here we can say children, and we can remove this BG background. Great. Now that we have the page and the primary layout, let's run our application. We can do that by opening up our terminal and splitting it. We'll use one half to run our application and the other to run additional commands. So I'll run npm run dev and then open it up in the browser. And as you can see, localhost 3000, there is a click me button. That's great. Now I want to update the styles of our application a bit, as our final application will only consist of the dark mode. So to quickly fix up some of the boring styles regarding the setup, the background, and so on, I have given you access to the complete GitHub repository for the code of this entire application. You can check it out, the link is in the description, but what I want you to specifically focus on is the README, and then under README, you can find all of the code snippets that we'll have to use in this application. There's just a few. We'll start with the globals.css. So simply expand it, copy it, go back to our application, and let's override our existing globals.css by pasting the new one right here. Don't get scared that there's too many classes right here. Most of these will be provided for you when we start using our editor. But in simple terms, what we do here is we change the background, some colors, and we even go a step further and create a custom scroll bar that's of a dark color to completely match our design. Other than that, we create some utility classes for Tailwind CSS so that whenever we use a text 28 semi-bold, we don't have to retype all of the classes right here, or the entire gradient, or the entire dialog. Rather, we can use these shorthands for these classes. But at any point, you can come back to this file and see exactly which classes are being used. With that in mind, this is it for the globals.css. Just for now, we'll have to comment out these 3 lines. And just make sure that these 3 imports are commented out. I believe they already should be on your end. We'll use them later on. So now if you go back to your browser, this should look much better. We're developers after all. We love a good dark mode. Yet another way in which we can customize the styles is by modifying the tailwind.config.ts file. So copy that one too, scroll down to tailwind.config.ts, copy everything and simply override it. Not too many changes right here, but you can notice that I added some custom colors that I took from the design. So now whenever we have to use this specific shade of blue or red or dark, we can just say colors blue 100 instead of specifying the entire hexadecimal string. And if you're wondering how I found these, and if you might want to give it a shot for yourself, everything is right here in the Figma design. So you can just come here, keep clicking the elements until you get to the part of which styles you want to copy. Or if you want to just get the main background, you can just select everything, copy it, and then add it to your Tailwind config. It's not super difficult. You just give a color a name, and then specify different shades. Great. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, we can start focusing on real functionality. What will we do first? Well, we can do the homepage where we can see all the different documents, or we can focus on the editor itself first. What do you say? Well, I think you came here for the editor, right? So let's do that first. Let's quickly check out the file and folder structure of our application. In the app, we currently have the layout and the page. That's it. But instead of having a single homepage, we will create something known as group routes. In Next.js, you do it by creating a new folder and you wrap the name in parentheses, such as root. That means that this will not be an actual route in your application, such as /root/home or something. It just acts as a regular folder in your file tree. So within here, we will have our homepage, so we can move the primary page to the root. Next, we can create a new route called documents. And then within documents, we can create a dynamic route. And in Next.js, you create dynamic routes by wrapping them in square brackets. And here we can give it a key. In this case, it'll be an ID. So we can create a new page.tsx for each specific document. Here, you can quickly run RAFCE, and we can call it document. Very soon, we'll also have authentication pages. So let's add a new group route for auth, and within it, we can create a new sign-in folder, and we can also create a new sign-up folder as well. We'll leave those for later. Now, let's check out the other pages in the browser. Back on the home page, we can still see the Click Me button, but if I go to Documents, what do you think we'll see? Try to think about it. Well, we won't be able to see anything because there is no page under Documents. There's only a page under Documents ID. So to visit that page, we can give a specific ID to these documents right here, and then we can get to the Documents page. And this is the page we'll be working on first, right? So let's begin. To get started implementing our editor, I prepared something special for you. It is a JSM editor npm package. And I did this so that if you decide to build any kind of a collaborative tool later on or any kind of a markdown editor, you can very quickly and easily get started. This is built on top of the lexical editor, but I've extracted only the most important parts so we can focus on what matters. So let me walk you through it. I'll copy this command. Back in the code, we can run npm I JSM-editor. After that, we'll have to use the CLI, npx JSM editor, add editor, so that the editor code gets added to our application. So let's simply paste it right here and press enter. As you can see, editor components added to components editor, editor styles added to styles, and then assets get copied to source assets. So let's check it out in the file tree. Here, you can see that a new source folder was created. And now you can drag and drop the things from inside of the source folder to our own file and folder structure. For example, we already have the components, so we only need to grab the editor folder from the components folder and drag and drop it into our components. Styles can go into the root of the directory, so we can pull it right here to the bottom. And for now, we'll delete the source and the assets folder, because if you go to the README, you can find the complete public assets for this project, including all sorts of icons needed for this project, not just the editor. I'm talking the logo, this edit icon here, the share icon, and so much more. So simply click here and click the download button at the top right. If it mentions any viruses, don't worry about that. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to teach you how to code. Once you download it, delete the existing public folder, unzip the one that you downloaded, and drag and drop it to the root of your directory. And select Copy Folder. Here, you can see all of the assets such as icons, images, even our favicon, and more. So that means that we can delete our favicon from here, from the root. And we can move this one over right here to our app. And now, back to globals.css, if you remember correctly, We can import the specific editor styles in here as well. So just uncomment this line, and for the time being, I'll still left the other two commented out. But as you can see, this style is pointing to the dark theme in our editor styles. Now, let's check out the actual editor component. I'm using the Command P keyword or Control P that allows you to quickly open up the files. So simply press Control or Command P and then start typing the name of the component, press Enter, and you're there. Or you can just manually find it on the File Explorer. You'll see that this is a longer component and we're using the lexical editor as the baseline. What I want you to focus on right now is taking a look at what this component does. So it's taking in the initial configuration and it's simply rendering out the editor. This is it. So let's use it as a component right within our document page. I'll do that by putting it right here within this div and start typing editor coming from components, editor, editor. It is a self-closing component. I'll save it and let's check it out in the browser. And as you can see, our entire screen just turned into a modern dark theme editor. So if I start typing something like test, you can already make it bold, you can make it italic. It supports all the key press events, so you can use the Command or Control B to bold it and do everything else. And we can even have different headings. It works amazingly well. So you might be thinking, but hey, what will I do here? Like, we already have a fantastic editor. What do we do next? I mean, just check this out. We'll bring this app to a whole nother level and call it LiveDocs. First of all, there will be a homepage where you can see all of your different documents, which means that we'll have to store them somewhere. Not only that, each one of these documents will be a collaborative environment of its own, where you can save the changes and see the changes that other people are making in real time. You'll have live cursors to track their work and overlay comments if you need to make any changes. Next, you'll be able to share your documents with everyone and invite them to your documents through an email address or just by sharing the link. You can find plenty of editors online, right? They're just NPM packages. But what I want you to do is to turn this editor into a complete live collaborative SaaS application with authentication, document storage, live collaborative features, enterprise-ready application monitoring, and more. That's what we do at JSM. But you already know that, so I don't have to repeat myself. So let's go straight into the code. On the design, we have this simple navigation bar above the editor. So let's make it happen. I'll create a new header component inside of the components folder and call it header.tsx. We can run RAFCE inside of there, and I'll wrap everything in a div and give it a class name equal to, in this case, I'll just say header. Within it, we'll render a link component, and this link will be coming from next/link with an href of / and a class name equal to, on medium devices, flex-1. Since it's pointing to /, we already know where it's going. It's gonna be the home page, so that means that we wanna show our logo. Inside of the link, we'll create an image tag, which will come from next/image, and it'll have a source of /assets /icons /logo.svg. This will be a logo with the name of the application as well. So we can say alt will be something like logo with name. Next, we can give it a width of about 120 and a height of about 32 pixels with a class name equal to hidden on larger devices, and on medium devices and larger, block, which means that we'll show it. Now we want to duplicate this right below, and we'll do a smaller logo. So we'll do icons, logo-icon. This will be logo without a name, so just logo, with a width of 32. And in this case, we'll say on medium devices, hide it, so hidden, and we'll also give it a margin right of 2. Right below both of these images, and below the link, we'll render the children. So everything else that we pass into this header. So let's accept that children as a prop right here, and we can give it a type of children, and we can specify that the type of this will be header props. Now, what is this header props? Well, you could go ahead and say type header props is equal to, and then say children will be of a type React.React node. You could do that. What I sometimes prefer is declaring all of the types in a different file. So if you go to the code snippets part of the README, you'll see a file called types index.d.ts. Copy it, and then back in the code, create a new folder in the root of the directory called types, and within it, create a new index.d.ts, stands for declaration, and paste everything you copied. If you want to find the header props, you can now see them here. We're just declaring a type for the header props. And from now on, you'll be able to use all of these types and interfaces without needing to import them. So if I go back and remove this header props, you can see that now the header knows exactly what it is accepting because it's inheriting it from its types. Great. Now let's use this header right here on our document page. Later on, we can use it on all the pages. For now, I'll simply put it right here. Header, and let's call it not as a self-closing component because we can still pass something into it. For example, let me just pass over a p tag that's going to say something like test and give it a class name equal to text-white. Now, if I go back to localhost 3000 on the documents page, you can see the LiveDocs logo on the left side and test on the right side. But what else will our navbar have? Well, let's create a new div right within it. And this div will have a class name equal to flex, w-fit, so it fits the content width, items-center, so we center it vertically, and justify-center, so we center it horizontally, and a gap of 2 between the elements. Now within it, for now, we can render a p tag with a class name equal to document-title, and there we can render the title of our document. For now, I will say something like, this is a fake document title, because for now it's just hard-coded, but soon enough we'll make it dynamic. If I save this, back in here, you can see this new fake title. Now, if we compare this with the final design, you'll see that we're missing some things, such as the ability to change the actual title. Sure, that's going to come later. But even more importantly, the share button and the avatars of the people who are currently viewing this document to bring in that collaboration. So to make that happen, of course, we need to add authentication to our project. So let's do that next. To add authentication to LiveDocs, our collaborative editor, we'll use Clerk. It's more than just a sign-in box. I love how simple it is to add complete authentication, and most importantly, with a beautiful design that's completely customizable very easily with Clerk. Don't forget, it's completely free to use it, and it will forever continue to be free until you hit more than 10,000 monthly active users, which if you do manage to hit, hopefully you're charging for your application and then you'll be able to upgrade. So with that in mind, click the special link down in the description to follow along and see exactly what I'm seeing when setting up Clerk. Once you get here from that link, click Get Started. Create your account with GitHub or Google. As you can see, I'm already using Clerk for 4 of my applications. Now we'll create the 5th. So click Create Application, enter the application name. In my case, that will be LiveDocs. And I love this user experience. You can select different sign-in options and you can see the changes that it makes to the form in real time. In this case, I will make it super straightforward and I will just use Google. It is super simple. Most people have it anyway, and it'll automatically give us those nice user avatar images. So let's click Create Application. You'll be redirected to your dashboard. As you can see, Next.js is pre-selected right here, and we can get started. So let's follow the steps. I'll copy the first step, and that is to install Clerk Next.js. So back in the editor, we can simply paste that command. After that, we can set our environment variables by copying them and creating a new .env.local file in the root of our directory. There, you can simply paste the keys that you just copied. After that, we'll have to update our middleware.ts file. So let's copy this one and create a new middleware.ts file and paste this one right here. Next, we have to add Clerk provider to our app. In this case, we don't have to copy everything as we already have a nicely done layout. We just need to wrap everything with the Clerk provider. So going back to our app, let's go to layout.tsx and wrap our HTML with the Clerk provider. Let's properly close it right here as well. And let's import it from Clerk Next.js. We can also pass additional property to it called appearance, just so I can show you how simple it is to modify the styles. And here you can say base theme. And for the base theme, we don't want to do something like a string of dark. Rather, we want to install a specific package. So let's do that in the terminal by saying npm install add clerk/themes. Once it gets installed, we can now simply say dark right here and import it from Clerk themes. Right below it, we can make further modifications by saying variables, color primary, and here we can add a specific color, such as #3371FF. I got this one directly from the design. We couldn't use a Tailwind CSS class name from the config, as this is not CSS class name. This is coming directly into the Clerk provider, so we had to do it as a string. And next to the color primary, we can also modify the font size by making it something like 16 pixels. Great. Now our entire application is wrapped with the Clerk provider. And do we have anything else to do? No, that's it. You did it. Now run npm run dev. Okay, before we do it, I think we forgot to use this signed out or signed in, and we are not going to show that in the layout. Rather, we'll show it within our header. So if we go back here to page.tsx, below this div, we can render the signed out and signed in components, and everything can be imported from Clerk. So let's do that right here. How convenient that is. Before we check it out, there's one more thing I want to do, and that is if you want to host your own sign in and sign up pages and not be redirected to some other URL, then you need to add these two lines to your .env.local. Next_public_clerk_sign_in_URL is equal to the route where you want to have your sign in. Okay. So just add this, make sure to spell it properly, and add it for the sign out as well. And the second one is for the sign up, not sign out. So make sure that you spell it properly. Once you have that, we can finalize our file and folder structure, at least when it comes to the auth pages. And the way that you do it with Clerk is you can add a new folder within the sign in folder with double square bracket, sign-in, and then you close the double square bracket. And within it, create a new page.tsx. Now, you might think that you have to add a lot of stuff to make this page look good, but trust me, you don't. The only thing you have to do is run rafce and then return a main property. It's similar to a div with a class name equal to auth-page. And within it, you can render a sign-in component coming from Clerk Next.js. And this right here will be sign-in page. We can now copy that and then duplicate the procedure with the sign up by creating a new folder, double square bracket, sign-up, close it, create a new page.tsx right within it, and then paste it. And of course, we have to modify it from sign in page to sign up page right here. And then this import from sign in to sign up. There we go. Now let's close all of the currently open files. I typically do that easily by holding the command key or control and then pressing W multiple times. I like to have a clean environment every now and then. And now if you go back to our documents page, you should be able to see a sign in button at the top right. Click it. It will automatically redirect us to localhost sign in where we can see this nice looking modal. But what do you say that we personalize it even further? We can do that by going back to Clerk, clicking your app name right here, and then clicking Settings. And here you can fully customize it by modifying your logo and the favicon. So say upload file, and you can open up the public folder which you downloaded and move to our application not that long ago. For the logo, I will use our assets, images, logo.png, and for the favicon, we can go back a bit and use the favicon.ico. Now, if you go back and reload, you can see that it looks even better and it even has the favicon. So is this really it? Have we just implemented the entire authentication system in just a couple of minutes? Well, let's give it a shot. I'll click continue with Google and I'm getting redirected to the application. And on the top right, check this out. There is a complete interface where I can manage my account. First of all, I have my image coming from Google, my full name and my email, and I can even click manage account to update my profile photo. And if we go to security, you can even see under which IP address am I logged in under which device, but we'll skip that for now. But hey, that's it. You just implemented a very robust authentication system in a couple of minutes. Great work. Now that our application is looking more polished every second, this fake title is jumping out a bit. So I will go back to the document file and I'll just say share, because instead of it, soon enough, we want to have a share button. But now that we have an actual markdown editor right here, and we have authentication, which means that we have different users using the app, we are ready to bring this application to another level by implementing collaborative functionalities. I'm talking collaborative rooms, live cursors that show you what other people are doing in a document in real time, live overlay comments, and the ability to share the document with other people. A lot of exciting stuff is coming. So let's make it happen. To start making our app come to life, of course, we'll use Liveblocks to add the collaborative features. So click the link down in the description. That'll allow you to follow along and see exactly what I'm seeing. By the way, it'll bring you to this amazing landing page that they recently created, where in real time, with other people, you can mess with these 3D elements across the screen. Definitely go ahead and check it out. With that said, let's click sign up or sign in at the top right. Next, choose either GitHub or Google and create a new project. As you can see, I already used it for a couple. Name a project with something like JSM and then give it your name, such as in my case, LiveDocs. For the time being, we'll switch the environment to development and click create project. And I love how all of these dev tools are becoming so much better with developer quick starts. We have seen how convenient everything was set up within Clerk. You didn't even have to check out the docs. We just created the account and made it work. It's going to be similar with Liveblocks. They're asking you, what do you want to build? In this case, it's the text editor. So let's select it. We'll be using the Liveblocks lexical editor. So let's select it as well. And how convenient, we can choose Next.js as the technology. And now we're given the next steps. So let's simply install it. So simply paste the command right here. And then we'll have to initialize the liveblocks.config.ts by running this command. So let's wait until this one gets installed and then we can paste it. Okay, one down and one more to go. We want to install the create Liveblocks app. And liveblocks.config.ts has been generated. So let's navigate over to it and see what we have there. Here, we can define the types for our configuration, such as the storage, the presence, and everything. Basically, letting Liveblocks know of which types are your rooms, your events, your users, and so much more. So, for example, let's modify the user meta. In this case, our user will have an ID of string, and it'll also have some additional information, such as the ID of string within the info. It'll also have a name of string, an email of string, an avatar of string, and a dedicated color of string as well. So now across our entire application, where we're using a user, Liveblocks will know how that user looks like. Going back, we can go to the third step, and that is to create a Liveblocks room. In this course, I'll teach you how to create multiple collaborative rooms, where you'll have one room for each document, okay? But for now, we can follow the instructions and then I'll teach you how to modify it later on. We'll copy this part right here, but with some tiny changes. Instead of putting this in the app room.tsx, we'll create a new file right here called a provider, provider.tsx. We can run RAFCE right here, and then we'll return what we just copied. Next, since we're using a provider, we'll have to make this a client component by using the use client directive. Next, we can say import Liveblocks provider coming from add Liveblocks /react/suspense. We'll use the room provider later on as we'll have many individual rooms, but I'll leave the client-side suspense, which is also coming from Liveblocks suspense. And then in here, we have the children. So we have to specify that as the props, children, and children will be of a type React node. And we never want to store keys in plain text right here. Actually, Liveblocks recommends against having this public API key anyway. So we can just remove this, and later down the line, I'll show you a different way of authenticating our users through ID tokens. So here we can say auth endpoint is equal to /API/Liveblocks-auth. So we can soon implement this endpoint, and I'll show you how that works. Other than that, we have this client-side suspense right here, and this is a handy place to add a custom loader. So let's quickly do that by creating a new component in our components folder called loader.tsx, run RAFCE, give this div a class name equal to loader, and render a Next.js image with a source equal to /assets/icons and /loader.svg with an alt tag of loader, a width of about 32, a height of 32, and how convenient this is, Tailwind CSS provides a class name called animate-spin, which will spin this loader indefinitely. Great. So now we can go back here, and instead of using this basic loading text, we can now use our self-closing loader component, and we can go back into it, and right after the image, we can say loading ... still. Great. So now in our provider, we have the Liveblocks provider, which is wrapping the client-side suspense. But remember, we removed the room out of the equation. So where are we going to create a new room? First, let's use this provider within the layout, and then I'll show you. So if we go here, you can already see that we are wrapping our application with the Clerk provider, but right below the body, we also want to wrap everything in our provider coming from /provider, and this is our Liveblocks provider. And now every single component and page within our application will have knowledge of Liveblocks integration. So let's go into the page that needs it the most, which is the document details page, this one right here. And here we'll use a new component, which we can create, called a collaborative room.tsx. Run RAFCE, and here we can add that room part that we took out from the quick start before. Let me just refresh your memory. See, we just used the Liveblocks provider so far, but now we can copy this room provider part. And the reason why we extracted it into a new component and a new page is because we'll have multiple rooms for each one of our documents. So let's paste it right here. Let's import the room provider from React Suspense and client side as well. And don't forget, this will have to be turned into a client component. So we can say use client. And in this case, we don't need any children right below it. What we do need is a div with a class name equal to collaborative room. And now here we can render that header that we had before in the page. Remember? This one right here, as well as the editor. So we'll take it out of the document and we'll put it right here within this div within a room. And with it, we also have to get all of the imports. So let's copy them and paste them right here. And let's indent it properly. Now you can see that each room provider has its own ID. This is static for now, but of course, later on, we'll generate a unique ID whenever a user generates a new document. Next, it says add the Liveblocks room to your page. Okay, we have done that. And set up the collaborative lexical text editor. We have done that using the JSM editor package, which is very similar to what they have here. We already have the toolbar in our editor, so I'll skip this. Next, we have render threads. We'll add this later on once we add the comments. And then after that, we have the style the editor. And this is where those two lines come in handy. So remember, back in the globals.css, before we had them commented out, but now we don't have to do that anymore because we have successfully installed the Liveblocks package. And the next step is to authenticate our users. To authenticate our users, I found a very convenient doc page from Liveblocks. Not this one that opens up once you click this button, but I will link it below this lecture. It's this one. Set up ID token permission with Next.js. It's a nice step-by-step guide. So let's follow it. First step is to install Liveblocks node package. So let's copy it and paste it in the terminal. The second step is to set up the authentication endpoint. So we can copy it, and now we'll create a new API route within our Next.js application. So let's close all of the currently open files and go to App, create a new folder called API. Within it, create a new folder called Liveblocks -auth, and then within it, create a new file called route.ts, and then simply paste what you copied. Let's make a couple of modifications to this to further optimize it. First of all, I want to extract the part where we set up our instance of Liveblocks so we can use it in multiple places. I'll copy this part, and I'll go to our lib and create a new file called liveblocks.ts, and I'll paste it here. Of course, for this to work, we have to import Liveblocks, and we won't leave the secret in plain text. Rather, I will copy it and say process.env.liveblocks _secret_key as string. So TypeScript knows that something will be there. And we can say export const Liveblocks. So now we'll be able to use it anywhere. But of course, let's head over to .env.local and let's paste it right here. Liveblocks _secret_key is equal to this key right here. Next, we can import Liveblocks from /lib/Liveblocks. And we don't need this other instance of Liveblocks coming from Liveblocks node because we have already created our specific version of it. Next, you can see that they created some pseudocode right here for fetching our user. Liveblocks wanted to be agnostic when it comes to the type of authentication you're using, so you're free to use something else. In this case, we're going to make it work with Clerk. So to make that happen, we can say const Clerk user is equal to await current user coming from Clerk Next.js server, and that's it. You just call it like this. Next, we can do a simple check and see if there is no Clerk user. We can redirect coming from next navigation to /sign in. Next, we want to form the user in a way that Liveblocks accepts it. So let's simply say const user is equal to an object and give it an ID of Clerk user.id, and then give it the info where we can provide additional information about the user. Now we can destructure some of these properties directly from the Clerk user by saying const ID is equal to, and that's coming from Clerk user inside of curly braces. And now we can say just ID is ID or shorthand ID. We can also get some of the other parts like first name, last name, email addresses, plural, image URL, and that's it. So now we can add this additional info, such as ID within the info as well. Name will be a string of first name, last name. Email will be email addresses 0.email address. Avatar will be image URL. And finally, we want to create a special color for each one of these users. So we can say color, and you could generate randomly any kind of color right here. What I would prefer to do is to create some function that would generate it. So I believe one of the last snippets you'll copy is this libutils.ts file. So copy it, and then we can go to libutils and then override everything that's here right now. You'll notice that here we have a list of colors that are bright, and then we have some function that returns a random color. And don't ask me if this was generated using ChatGPT. Now, if we go here, we can simply call that function under color by saying get user color from libutils, and we can pass the ID that we can use to automatically generate it. Now, once we have the user, we're trying to identify that user by their email. So we'll say user.info.email, and group IDs will be just set to an empty array like this. Finally, under user info, we'll pass user.info. And this is it. So this is the way to authenticate users in Liveblocks. Let's go back to the doc page and see what else we have to do. We have already set up the client side, and we have added the auth endpoint there. So that's good. And then we need to set permissions to access a specific room. Or in other words, we need to create a room whenever we create a new document. So let me show you how to do that. For now, I will just copy this part right here for creating a room, and I'll create a new folder under lib called actions and create a new file called room.actions.ts. Within here, we want to say export const, and we want to create a function that doesn't create a room, rather it creates a document, which in our case is synonymous with a room. So we can say export const create document is equal to an async function that accepts the user ID and the email, and that'll be of a type create document params. And of course, that's an arrow function. Before we create a room, we have to get a room ID. So we can do that by saying const room ID is equal to, and here you can use any kind of ID generator. Typically, I use UUID v4. In this case, you can run npm install. Something like nano ID is good as well. And then at the top, you can import nano ID from nano ID like this, and just call it nano ID. Once we have the room ID, we can open up a new try and catch block. In the catch, we can say console.log and something like error happened while creating a room, and then console log the error. And then in the try, we'll try to actually create a room. Before we do that though, we have to form the metadata for that room by saying const metadata is equal to an object where we have a creator ID of the user who created that room equal to user ID, their email, and the title, which for now will be untitled. And finally, we can paste what we copied, which is the way to create a room. We can import Liveblocks, not from Liveblocks node, rather from /Liveblocks, because that points to our own instance where we have already added the key. And when it comes to the level of access that we want to have, we can say const user accesses. That'll be of a type room access equal to an object where we have an email, and it'll have a permission of room write. So users can edit different documents. That means that now we can remove these different types of accesses and simply say const room is equal to await liveblocks.createRoom. Here we can pass the room ID, which is now dynamic, and then we can pass the metadata, the user accesses, and the default accesses, which will be just an empty array. And make sure to spell this properly. This will be users accesses. That's what create room is accepting, as you can see here. Once we have the room, we want to revalidate a path from next cache. So make sure to import that, and that way a new document will appear on the front end whenever we create a new room. And finally, we can return this new room. But whenever you're returning stuff from the server action, you have to actually parse and stringify it. So I'll call parse stringify from utils and then pass a room right here. Oh, and I almost forgot. This right here is a server action. So this will only be happening on the server because Liveblocks right here, this instance, is Liveblocks node, which means it runs on server, not on client side, which means that at the top, you have to add the use server directive to ensure that this code runs on the server. And now we have this server action that we can call from our front end. And where will we do that? Well, we'll do it from the homepage. When a user presses start a blank document, that'll create a new document, which is at the same time a new room. Right now on the documents page, we cannot see anything because we haven't yet created a valid room. But if we go back to the homepage, you can see click me button, which is just a fake dummy button. But now we can turn it into an actual list of documents to show, which at the start will be none. But the most important part is the actual button that'll allow us to create this room using the new server action we have created. So going back to the code, we can head over to root and then go to the page. We haven't seen it in a long time. It's finally the time to focus on that as well. So right here, we'll turn this div into a main tag. That's an HTML5 semantic main tag with a class name equal to home-container. Right within it, we'll render our component called header, which we have created not that long ago. And in this case, we'll pass it an additional class name equal to sticky, left 0, and top 0. That means that we have to get into the header and make it accept additional class names by adding the class name in the props. And then alongside the typical header classes, we want to render something known as CN, which stands for class name, coming from libutils. We can wrap the header and then also render these additional class names when needed. Next, we can render a div within that header with a class name equal to flex, items-center, gap of 2, and on large devices, a gap of 4. Later on, we'll render a notification list right here. And here we can also show if signed in, we can show the user button, just so we can interact with our profile. Of course, both of these things are coming from Clerk. So now if we go back, you can see LiveDocs, notification, and the user button. Next, we can go below this header and we can create a new div. This div will be different depending on how many documents we have. So let's say cons documents is equal to an empty array right now, which is truly the case. So let's remove it for a second and say if documents.length is greater than 0, then we want to display a div, else we want to display another div. For now, since we really have 0, we can focus on this second part where we'll give it a class name of document list empty. And here we can render an image with a source equal to /assets, /icons, and /doc.svg. Make sure to import the image from next image. Give it an alt tag equal to document with a width of about 40, height of about 40, and a class name of margin X of auto. If you go back, you can just see a document logo right here. Next, we have to add a button to create a document. And for that one, I'll create a new component, just so we can nicely contain all the logic within it. I'll call it add document btn.tsx, where we can run RAFCE, and we can automatically import it right here below the image, add document btn, and to it, we need to pass two different things. We need to know who is the user that is creating this account. So to be able to know that, we can very easily get the access to that info with Clerk by saying const Clerk user is equal to await current user coming from Clerk Next.js. And we have to make this page an async page. Next, if we don't have a Clerk user, we can just redirect using the next navigation redirect to /sign in, because unauthenticated users cannot create documents. Now that we have that info, we can pass the prop of user ID equal to clerkuser.id, as well as an email equal to clerkuser.email addresses 0.email address. That's a mouthful, but we wrote it. And we can now move into the add document btn to accept these two props, the user ID and the email, which both are of a type add document btn props. Within here, we can create that button. We already have created a Shatsian component of button, so we can just import it from UI button, and it can say something like p tag class name is equal to hidden, and then in smaller and larger, we can actually make it block so we can see the text, and we can say start a blank document. If we go back, you can see this button right here, but now let's style it a tiny bit. To this button, we can provide a type of submit because we wanted to submit the form. And if we wanted to submit something, we have to know what. So let's say on click, we want to run a function called add document handler. So let's define that function right at the top of the return by saying const add document handler is an async arrow function. I'll show you which logic to add here later on, but for now, let's add the class names to this button, such as gradient-blue, flex, gap of 1, and a shadow of MD. Also, above the p tag, we can have an image, which we need to import from next image. That'll have a source equal to /assets, /icons, /add.svg with an alt tag of add, a width of 24, and a height of 24 as well. And let's not forget to turn this into a client-side component. So right here at the top, I can say use client, and we need to do that because we're using buttons. We're clicking stuff. So if we go back, we can see a nice looking button right here. And since we don't have any documents, it's taking all the space, which is exactly what I want. So now what do we want the button to do once we click it? Well, let's open up a try and catch block. In the catch, we can simply console log the error. And in the try, it'll be pretty simple. We just want to call the create document server action that we have created not that long ago. And to it, we can pass an object with the user ID and the email. The output of that will be the actual room. So we can say const room is equal to await create document. Once we get the room, and if we get it, so if room, then we want to use the router to push to that specific page. So let's declare the router above by saying const router is equal to use router coming from next navigation, not next router. And we can say router.push to a template string of /documents/ and then dynamically room.id like this. Okay, what do you say? Let's give it a shot. I'll go back right here and click start a blank document. And if everything goes right, we should be redirected to a new documents page with a new specific ID. This means that everything went right. But why cannot we see this new document that we worked so hard to create? Let's go to the code and check it out. I'll open up the root documents and then the page under the ID. Oh, and silly me, I haven't even put anything in here. Remember when we took out the editor from here, we put it in a collaborative room. So what we have to do now is finally call that room right here, collaborative room. It's a self-closing component, which we can just put right here. And we can also make this a main because it's the primary thing on the page, and give it a class name of flex, w-full, flex-call, and items-center. Now, if I save this and go back, would you look at that? Our editor is back. And now this is not just a random document. You can see that this is an actual document with a special ID, which is tied to a Liveblocks collaboration room. And we can even verify that by going to our dashboard under Rooms. And you can see that the room with that same ID has been created. And that room has storage attached to it, and the comments and the metadata and the permissions. We'll look into all of that very soon. So to give you just a little glimpse into the collaborative features that we're going to implement later on, I'll show you how to display active collaborators on the top right of our screen. Right next to your logo, you'll be able to see the logos of other people that are viewing or editing the same document. So let's do that next. To start adding active collaborators, we'll have to quickly head over to our room actions.ts and just for the time being, modify the create document. Currently, we have user accesses, and only the user that has created the document will have the right access. Other people will have no accesses. But what we can do for the time being, before we implement the share functionality, just so we can see how other people can access the document, we can modify the default accesses to also include room right. Only for the time being, later on we'll switch this back to no access by default. So now that we have done this, we can create a new document by going to the home page. And here you can create a new blank document. And you can see now we have a different ID, and we can type test right here. So now how would we see the other users that are looking at or editing this document? Let me show you. We'll do that by creating an active collaborators list by going to components and creating a new component called active collaborators.tsx. There we can run RAFCE, and we first need to get access to other people viewing the document. And that is super simple using Liveblocks. The only thing you have to do is say const others is equal to use others, coming from Liveblocks React Suspense. What a simple way to get access to the other collaborators. Now we can extract them by saying const collaborators is equal to others.map, where we get each other person, and for each one, we just want to return the other.info. Now that we have them, we can return them in a list by returning a UL, an unordered list, with a class name equal to collaborators list, and within it, we can map over the collaborators by using the collaborators.map, and for each collaborator, okay, take a shot every time I say collaborator, for each collaborator, you can just return a new list item like this. Each list item has to have a key since we're mapping over it, and that's going to be equal to, well, I won't be repeating collaborators anymore. Rather, I will destructure the values out of it. So I will destructure the ID, the avatar, and the name, as well as the color. And now the key will simply be the ID of that collaborator. And then right below the li, we can have an image where we can render a source equal to avatar. We can render an alt tag equal to name. We can render a width of 100, a height of 100. Let's also make sure to import the image just so we don't forget, and give it a class name equal to inline-block, size of 8, rounded-full, ring of 2, and ring dark 100. And we can also give it some custom styles by saying border is dynamic, 3-pixel solid, and then we can pass the color right here dynamically. Great. And this is it for the active collaborators. But where will we render this? Well, let's head back to our collaborative room. and go inside of the header. Below this existing div, we'll create a new div. This one will have a class name equal to flex, w-full, flex-1, justify-end, gap of 2, and in small devices, a gap of 3. And within there, we can render the active collaborators self-closing component. Just like that. We can also put this signed out and signed in thing right here in that second div, since we want to show them at the end of the screen. If I save this, we can just see the loading. I think this is because we're missing something in the provider to make the collaborative experience with other users work. So if we go back right here, we need to navigate over to the provider component. And here we have to pass some additional properties to the Liveblocks provider. We have passed it the Liveblocks auth, but right below it, we also need to provide a way in which it will resolve the users. So this will be an async callback function. So that's going to look something like this. That's going to accept all the user IDs, and we're going to get all the users by saying const users is equal to await get clerk users. And this is a function which we have to create. So let me comment it out for now, and let's create it under user actions. So I'm going to go to lib actions and then create a new file called user.actions.ts. And here, don't forget to add the use server directive at the top and export const, a new function called get clerk users, which is an async function that accepts user IDs of a type, user IDs, a string array, and we can open up a new try and catch block. In the catch, we can say something like console log, and then say error fetching users. And in the try, we can try to fetch all clerk users. By saying const, we can destructure the data that we get back by calling the await clerk client coming from Clerk Next.js .users .get user list. And to it, we need to pass the email addresses of all the users, which we're storing as user IDs. That's going to be email address right here. Once we get that data, we need to form it into users by saying const users is equal to data.map, where we get each individual user, and we want to immediately return an object for each one of these users. An immediate returns means that you wrap the function block into parentheses. So that makes it not a function block, it just makes it a return of an object. So then say that the ID is user.id, name is a template string of user.firstname and user.lastname. After that, we have an email, which is equal to user.emailaddresses 0.email-address, and the avatar will be user.image URL. So now we're forming our users, and we want to sort the users by the user ID to make sure the order is consistent. We can do that by saying const sorted users is equal to user IDs dot map, where for each email we can run the users.find, and we can compare that user. So if user.email is equal to the email that we're searching for. So what we're doing here is, once again, sorting the users by the order of the user IDs to make sure that the order is consistent with those user IDs. Finally, we can return parse stringify coming from utils, and then pass in the sorted users. Now, going back to the provider, we can uncomment this line and import get clerk users from lib user actions. And to it, we need to pass the user IDs that we're getting from Liveblocks right here. Finally, we can return the users. Now, if we go back, there's still a loading here. So what I can try to do is stop the terminal from running by pressing Ctrl+C and then rerunning it once again. I get this weird error saying that I have 2 dots at the sign up, and it actually should be 3. So if I go to sign in, you can see ... and here in the sign up, I had 2 dots. Okay, didn't complain before, now it complains, so I'll just add an additional dot and rerun my application. It's good now, and we're back on localhost 3000. So if I reload the same screen, it is still loading. If you open up the console, you'll notice this very convenient and very descriptive errors from Liveblocks saying you have no access to this room, we're closing down this socket for you. And that's why we can see the loading. So what this means is that we have to provide our user with the access. Now, why does our user not have the access already? Well, if you go to the collaborative room, you'll notice that we're wrapping this entire document and the editor with the room provider, and currently there's a hard-coded my room ID right here. So we have to find a way to get access to the ID of a specific room belonging to that document. And we can do that by going to room.actions, and after we create a document, we want to create a new function or action called export const get document, which will be an async function accepting the room ID and the user ID. So the room ID and the user ID, we have to specify their types. They're going to be of a type. Room ID is a string, and the user ID is a string as well. Now moving here, we have to get access to a room by saying const room is equal to await liveblocks.getRoom, to which we pass the room ID. Next, we have to check if the user has access to the document's room by saying const has access. We do that by using the object.keys on the room user's accesses because it's an array of different objects. So we can say room.user_accesses, and then we can call the .includes on it to check whether this array includes the ID of the user that is currently trying to look at this room. If we have no access, we can just return null or maybe even throw a new error saying something like you do not have access to this document. Else we do have the access, so we can return parse stringify room. And all of this can be wrapped in a new try and catch block. So let's do this. I will wrap it in a try and catch. And right here in the catch, we can do a console log saying something like error happened while getting a room. Now, where will we call this get document? We can call it on a page where we're trying to fetch the information about that room, which is right here in the document page. So this is the one that is under an ID documents. And here we have access to the ID of the document we're trying to access coming straight to us through params. So we can say params and then destructure the ID, and that is of a type search param props. We can also get access to the user ID by saying const clerk user is equal to await and then get the current user from Clerk Next.js. And of course, since we're using await, we can make this function async and say if there is no clerk user, in that case, we can redirect. So let's say redirect using the next navigation to /sign in. But if we do have the user, we want to check people's permissions to this room by calling this new function we created. Const room is equal to await get document, which we need to import from room actions, to which we can pass the room ID equal to the ID from params, and the user ID equal to clerk user dot email addresses 0 dot email address. In this case, we're using the email address as the ID since it's unique anyway. If there is no room, we want to redirect back to the home. And later on, once we play with more permissions, I'm going to add a to-do right here to assess the permission level that the user has. But for now, all users have permissions, so we should be good. We just need to pass the room information to our collaborative room, such as the room ID equal to ID, room metadata equal to room.metadata, and that's it for now. So let's go into the collaborative room and let's accept these props. I'll get a room ID as well as room metadata, and say that's of a type collaborative room props. So now that we have this room ID, well, we can very easily exchange this fake ID with the real one. So if we go back, Liveblocks will have no issues loading this document up for us. Great. Now what you can do next is copy this URL and open up a new browser or the same browser in incognito mode. In my case, I'm currently using Arc, so I'll switch to Chrome and I'll sign in with a different account. And if I paste it, we get redirected back to home. I think I know why that is. If we go back to room actions in the get document, right now this has access is checking the user by email. But for the time being, as we said, everyone can access the document. So let's simply remove this has access check. And I will add myself a to-do to bring this back later on. So now if I paste the URL once again, you can notice that the app breaks, which is great. Trust me, this is a good one because it means that everything was supposed to work. It was very close to working and it actually did work, but we have to add the source of our profile photo to our next config. So let's just copy the host name, img.clerk.com, which is where the image is being hosted. Go back to our app and go to next.config.mjs. Right here, we'll have to create a new object called images, add remote patterns, which is an array of an object where a protocol has to be HTTPS, and then we can add a host, which in this case will be img.clerk.com. And this was supposed to be host name. There we go. And I believe we'll have to rerun our application once again. Oh, that's good. It's letting me know that I have a typo. No colon right here. So if I fix it, we should be good. I reloaded the app on both my screens, and would you look at that? Right here next to my logo, we have another user doing something. Right now, it looks a bit weird because both of my accounts have the same JavaScript Mastery logo. But if you have different photos, you'll be able to see that you are active on that document and another person is active as well. And if I close my Chrome, you'll notice that in real time, that live collaborator is gone. Great. But just having that live collaborator there isn't doing much. We just see that somebody is viewing the document. But soon enough, we'll start implementing other collaborative features, such as comments, the ability to edit the document at the same time, live cursors, and so much more. But before we do just that, let's fix up the document header. We'll make this share button look a bit nicer and add the input field so we can change the title of the document. To do that, I'll close all of the currently open files and navigate over to our collaborative room. Here we have our header, and within it, we'll add some of these additional functionalities. So let's do that next. Up next, we want to make sure to have this nice looking title, and it has this little icon that turns it into an input field, which is pretty cool as well. And then once you click outside, it will actually edit the title, and we'll also add a share button. Even though this input at the top might seem simple, I'll show you how to do it properly. That means editing it properly, turning it into an input, and even finishing the editing process by clicking outside of the input. So let's start by adding some use states at the top. We already are on a use client component, which is good. So we can say use state, and the first one will be editing. So are we currently editing? At the start, it'll be set to false, and we can import use state from React. Right below, we can create another use state, and that one will be called loading. So are we currently loading or not? And at the start, it'll be set to false. We also need to have one for the document title. So we can say use state, document title, and set document title at the start equal to room metadata dot title. So we can have a default value. We'll also need to work with some references to some elements. So we can declare them right now by saying const container ref equal to use ref of a type HTML div element, and the value at the start will be null, but we do have to import use ref from React, and we can duplicate this over and create an input ref as well. Now we can head down and go inside of this first div that is inside of the header, and we can give it a ref equal to container ref, so we can target it later on. Next, I'll remove this share p tag and open up a dynamic block of code that checks whether we're currently editing and if we're not loading. In that case, we want to show an input, and this will be a shadcn input. So let's install it by saying npx shadcn-ui add latest add input. And then as soon as it is installed, we'll be able to import it from UI input. We also have to close our ternary operator by returning an empty React fragment with a p tag that's just going to render the document title. So if we're not rendering, it'll be a static p tag with a class name equal to document-title. So let's quickly check that. As you can see, it simply says untitled right now, which is what we're getting from the database. Now let's modify this input by giving it a type equal to text, a value equal to document title, a ref equal to input ref, a placeholder equal to enter title, an onChange equal to a callback function where we get an event, and we call the set document title and pass the eTarget value, which is the value of the input we want to add. We're also going to add an onKeyDown property, so we can register every key press. And for each one of these key presses, we want to call the update title header function. So let's declare it right here, const update title handler equal to a callback function that accepts an event, which is going to be a keyboard event like so. And we can now just call the update title handler. Oh, looks like we'll have to modify the actual type. It's not a keyboard event, rather a keyboard event, specifically the HTML input element keyboard event. And we might need to say react.keyboard event. And now it's good. Also, we'll disable this input when we're not editing. So it'll be disabled, and we can give it a class name equal to document-title-input. But now, how can we switch between the states of editing and not editing? Well, let's do that right here below, not outside of the div, but just outside of this dynamic block, where we can check if current user type is equal to editor. So this will be a special variable depending on whether the user has the access to edit the room. For now, I will just hard code that at the top. Const current user type is equal to a string of editor. If the user is an editor, and if we're not currently editing, then we can return an image. Of course, we need to import the image from Next.image, and we have to add and right here. Then this image will be of /assets /icons /edit.svg with an alt tag of edit, a width of 24, a height of 24, with an onClick, which is going to do only one thing, set editing to true, and a class name of pointer, so we know that it is clickable. On the other hand, if the current user type is not editor, we can copy this part and paste it below and say something along the lines of current user type is not editor and we're not editing. In that case, we're going to return a p tag that'll have a class name of view only tag, and it can say something like view only. Finally, we have to have the loading indicator. So we're going to say if loading, then we're going to render a p tag with a class name equal to text-sm and text-gray-400, that's going to say saving ... Great. Now, if we go back, you can see that if we click on untitled, it is not editable. But if we click this icon, then we can start typing into it. But now, if we exit out of the screen, which is the typical behavior on these great applications, it is not properly saving it. It doesn't end the input. We're still there. So that's something we have to still do. And we can do that by creating a new use effect right here. So let me create a new use effect handler that's going to have a dependency array right here. And we have to import the use effect from React. In it, I'll create a new function called const handle click outside that'll accept one param, which is an event of a type mouse event. And we simply want to check if container ref.current exists, and if no container ref.current.contains event.target as node, then that must mean that we're no longer editing. So we can say set editing is false. And we can add and remove this event listener. So document that add event listener on the mouse down. We're going to call the handle click outside. And also we want to clean that event up, remove event listener on mouse down, handle click outside. So now if we go back here and start typing something, and if I click outside, you can see that we're back on the not editing, rather viewing tag. But if we reload the screen, it will just clean up again because we didn't actually update the title. It is still untitled. So to implement the full functionality, we'll do that in the update title handler, where we're going to check if the e.key is triple equal to the enter key. Then we're going to set the loading to true and open up a new try and catch block. In the catch, we'll have a console log of error. And at the end of both the try and the catch, we'll set the loading back to false because we're done with the procedure. But now we have to actually update the title. So first, we're going to check if the document title, the new one, is not equal to the current title, so room metadata.title. That means that it's different. And if that's the case, we want to call the update document function. So this is a new function which we are yet to create in the room actions. So let's quickly head over to room actions and let's create a new action. Export const update document is equal to an async function that accepts a room ID of a type string and a title of a type string as well. We can open up a try and catch block. In the catch, I'll put a error message saying error happened while updating a room. And we can simply try to update the room using the built-in Liveblocks functionalities. So const updated room is equal to await Liveblocks.update room, where the first parameter is the room ID, and the second one is the options object, where we can provide a metadata and then provide the new updated title. Once we get this updated room, I will call the revalidate path so that things actually change on the front end, and it'll point to documents /room ID. And finally, we want to return parse stringify the updated room. So now if we go back right here, we can update the title for real by saying const updated document is equal to await update document coming from room actions, where we pass the room ID and the new document title. And then if we have access to an updated document, we will stop with the editing. In this case, we also have to make the update title handler an async function as we're using await. And there's one small tweak that we have to do as well, which is add another use effect below the existing one. It will have one thing in the dependency array, and that is the editing part. So it's going to be recalled every time when we're editing or not editing. And here we want to do an if statement and say if editing and if input ref dot current then we want to focus it. So we want to focus on the input so that the user knows that they're typing. Great. Moving back, we can actually give it a shot. I will click right here on the edit and I will type something. And if I exit out of it, you can see that it remains saved. If I enter in it and I type something like, this is a new title, and press enter, it says saving, it saves it, and when I reload, you can see that we have a new title. But what would happen if we change it again? So I'm going to say test, I will exit out of it, and I will reload the screen then. It looks like it didn't save it. So to fix that, we just have to call the update title handler on this use effect where we click on the outside. I'll just call the update document action and give it the room ID and the document title whenever we click outside of the function. So we can put that right here in this if statement. And I think we have to recall this use effect whenever the document title changes or whenever the room ID changes, which shouldn't be often. If I go here right now and I just say new title and exit out of it, you can see that the new title remains, which is great. And that's it. Now we have a much better header for our document, and it allows us to change and update our title for real, and it sends the updates over to Liveblocks to store it in their storage. We won't add the share button just yet because we'll do it later on once we decide to implement full sharing and permissions functionalities with a modal that will allow you to enter specific email addresses in it. But for now, I want to give some love to our homepage as well. Because if you lose this ID in the URL, or if you mistakenly exit out of it, it'll be very hard to come back to this special document. So if you go to the homepage, it's still pretty empty, right? It says start a blank document, and we cannot see a list of the existing documents. So next, let's fetch all the documents we have created so far and display them right here so we can very easily get back to them. To start displaying the list of all the existing documents, let's head over to our homepage, which is under App and then Root. Currently, we have only the state where the documents.length is equal to 0, which is what we're always showing. But now we can fetch real documents and then list them right here. So let's do just that. I will head over to room.actions.ts, and we already have a create, get, and update. But now, instead of saying get document, we want to fetch all the documents. So we can start by copying this entire server action of get document, pasting it below, and saying get documents, plural, and the only parameter will be an email for the user for whom we're trying to fetch the documents for. So we can say email of a type string. Doesn't even have to be inside of an object. Great. Once we get that, we want to fetch all the rooms. So we can say const rooms is equal to liveblocks.getRooms, plural. And we want to get all the rooms where the user ID is equal to the email that we have. And believe it or not, that is it. We can just say return parse stringify rooms. And here we can say error happened while getting rooms. Now, if we go back to the page, instead of these fake documents, we can fetch real ones. So that's going to look something like this. Const room documents is equal to await get documents coming from lib room actions, to which we need to pass the clerk dot email addresses 0 dot email address. And this is supposed to be clerk user. Once we have the room documents, we can just map over them right below by saying room documents dot data dot length is greater than 0. Then we want to show something. That something will be a div with a class name equal to document list container with an inside div of a class name equal to document list title with an h3 within it. And that h3 will have a class name equal to text-28 semi-bold. And it's going to simply say all documents. And by the way, I just want to point your attention to how simple it was to create this get documents server action, because you already have the structure, right? We have already done it in different places. You know exactly where it needs to go. And the only thing we had to do is use a different Liveblocks function to fetch the rooms. And the logic and the procedure and the structure is already there. We're just re-following the same steps we have created before. So now here we are saying all documents. And here we can also add the add document btn in case we want to add more documents. And to it, we have to pass the user ID and the email. So let's just copy that from here and add it right here. Next, we're going to exit one of these divs and form a UL, an unordered list, with a class name equal to document-ul. And within it, we want to map over our documents. Before we do that, we can simply check how it currently looks. We have the all documents and start a blank document, and now below it, we'll create a list. So let's map over the room documents.data.map, where we get each individual document of a type any for now, and we want to immediately return, so that's parentheses, not a function block, an li for each one of these documents with a key equal to document.id. As a matter of fact, we can destructure things out of this document, such as the ID, the metadata, and the created at. And now, instead of document ID, we can simply say ID right here. Next, we want to give this li a class name equal to document-list-item. And within it, we want to render a link component, because each one of these list items will be clickable. And once you click it, it will lead to that document details page or to the actual editor. This link has to be imported from Next link, and it'll have an href pointing to /documents/document.id. Next, we can give it a class name equal to flex, flex-1, items-center, and a gap of 4. And since we destructured the ID, we don't have to say document ID, we can just say ID. Within this link, we'll have another div with a class name equal to. Now, within this one, we'll show a document photo, but only on larger devices. So typically, it'll be hidden, rounded MD, BG dark 500, padding of 2, and on small devices, block. Because on small and larger, we want to show it, but on extra small, we want to hide it. And here, we can put a next image, which we can import from next image. And to it, we can pass a source of /assets/icons /doc.svg with an alt tag of file, a width of 40, and a height of 40 as well. Finally, below that div, we can have one more div where we'll put the title and other metadata. So we can give it a class name equal to space-y-1 and a p tag equal to class name of line clamp 1, so the text doesn't jump out of the screen, and text-lg. And here we can render the metadata dot title. And one last thing, below this p tag, we can have another p tag where we'll have a class name equal to text-sm, font-light, text-blue-100. And here we can say created about, and then call the date converter from libutils, to which we can pass the created at property. This date converter is a function that I created using ChatGPT that'll basically take the timestamp and say how many weeks, days, hours, or minutes ago was the document created. So now we're showing that as well. And below the link, I will add a to-do for myself here, and that is to add a delete button right here. We'll do that later on. Finally, if we go back to the homepage, you can see the untitled document, which I created 16 hours ago. I did take a bit of a break from recording. I'm not sure if you think I do this in one sitting or not, but now you get the idea. And then the new title that I created 1 hour ago. So this is the latest document which I created. And if you click on it, we get nicely redirected to it, which is what we wanted to do. Also, when clicking on them, I'm noticing that there's a loading that appears on top, and there should be a bit of a nicer loading component. So we can quickly fix that. If we go to a collaborative room, I believe, there is a loading in the fallback right here. So actually here, we want to render our own loader component coming from that/loader. And now if we go into this one, you'll notice that it's in the middle of the screen and it's actually spinning. Great. It's about all of these little things that make the application so much better. You notice how much code we had just to create this input at the top, but it makes a big difference because now you can edit it and just say my new great title. You can use the enter key to finish it. You get immediate feedback that says saving, and even on the homepage, it'll be revalidated immediately. That's the beauty of Next.js. So with that in mind, our application is starting to look more and more like it does on the finished design. We have the homepage, we can create a new document, we can check out the editor, but this entire time I've been telling you about live this, live that, all the different live functionalities and real-time collaboration functionalities that we're going to implement. And you might think, Adrian, but this is just some random markdown text editor. When are we going to add collaborative features? So far, we have only seen live collaborators on the top right. Well, now is the time. We'll start adding all the different features like live cursors, comments, and so much more stuff. So let's do that next. To start adding live features to our application, let's head over to our editor component. And if you scroll down, you'll notice that here we have the initial editor config. What we'll do is we'll wrap this initial config object with the Liveblocks config. The way that works is pretty simple. You just say Liveblocks config like this, and then you wrap this object. And where is this Liveblocks config coming from? Well, it's coming from a new package which we have to install by running npm install add liveblocks /react-lexical. So they have a special integration with a lexical editor, so we can make all of that work very easily. And then we can import it at the top by saying import liveblocks config coming from add liveblocks /react-lexical. Other than that, we also have to figure out if the text in the form is editable or not. For that, we have the editable property, and it's going to be true if the current user type has the permissions of an editor. So for now, I will leave it hard-coded, but now it's up to us to figure out the permissions. And we can do that right within our page, where we have the document's ID. Right here, as you can see, I even left a small note that says assess the permissions of the user to access the document. So right here at the top, we're getting the room. But we can also get access to the user IDs that have access to that room by saying const user IDs is equal to object.keys to get only the IDs from room.users accesses, like this. Make sure to spell it correctly. There's a lot of double letters. Once we have the IDs, we can fetch actual users by saying const users is equal to await get clerk users coming from user actions, to which we pass an object with the user IDs, like this. Next, we have to extract the user data by saying const users data is equal to users.map, where we get each individual user of a type user, and we automatically return an object. So to do an automatic return, you have to wrap an object inside of parentheses. Otherwise, it would just be a basic function block. First, we want to spread out all of the properties of that user But then we also want to give it a user type by saying room.users accesses, and then enter that specific user ID, or in this case, email. Question mark dot includes. So if it includes room right, then we want to give that user a type of editor, else we want to give it a property of viewer, okay? So we have taken everything regarding the user and we have appended the additional user type property. This is for all the users. But now we can discuss the same thing for only the current user. So we can say const current user type is equal to room.users accesses, enter the specific clerk user dot email addresses 0 dot email address, question mark dot includes room right, and if that is the case, we can give it the editor, else we can give it the viewer. Now that we have those properties, we can pass them into a collaborative room by saying users is equal to users data, and the current user type will be equal to current user type. Moving into the collaborative room, we can now destructure those props at the top by getting the users as well as the current user type. And we no longer have to hard code it right here at the top, and we can scroll down and pass it over to our editor by saying room ID is equal to room ID, as well as current user type is equal to current user type, like this. Now let's head into the editor and let's accept those props right here at the top, such as the room ID and the current user type, and those will be of a type room ID of a type string and current user type of a type user type. Great. So now we can properly adjust the editable property by saying if current user type is triple equal to editor, well, in that case, the form will be editable. That is great. And now we can slightly update the editor layout so that we can have the comments on the right side and the editor on the left side. First of all, we have this div with a class name of editor container size full. Then we have the toolbar plugin, which we'll put inside of an additional div. So let's put it right here, indent it properly, and let's give this div a class name equal to toolbar dash wrapper flex min dash w dash full and justify dash between. Let's save it. And if we check it out, this is how it looks like. Let's continue with the rest of the layout. I'll just make a quick note for myself here and say if the current user type is triple equal to editor, then they should also be able to see a delete modal like this, to which we can pass the room ID so we know which room to delete, but we'll code out this delete modal later on. So for now, I will just comment this line out. Next, going below, we can create another div. This div will have a class name equal to editor dash wrapper flex dash call items dash center and justify dash start. Here, we can also check out the status of loading up our editor by saying if status is triple equal to not loaded, or if status is triple equal to loading. In that case, we can return a loader component, else we can return an additional div. Of course, in the meantime, let's import the loader and let's declare this status right above by saying const status is equal to use editor status coming from Liveblocks editor, because now we have to actually hook it up to our room. So now within this inner div, we can put the entire editor by moving this div above. So 1, 2, 3, a few lines above, and indent it properly. And I don't even think we need this additional div that I created. So we can just do this and indent it properly. Let's also style it further by giving it a property of editor inner, min-h-1100 pixels, relative, margin bottom of 5, h-fit, w-full, max-w of 800 pixels inside of square brackets because we're providing a specific value, shadow-md, and enlarge devices margin bottom of 10. Within it, we have the rich text plugin with the content editable, a placeholder, and the error boundary. Finally, we have some plugins like the history plugin and the autofocus plugin. Here, we'll also add one plugin belonging to Liveblocks, and we'll only add it if the current user type is editor. So I'm going to say if current user type is triple equal to editor, in that case, we'll render a floating toolbar plugin like this. And this floating toolbar plugin is something that we get directly from Liveblocks, specifically their example with the editor. So I extracted it for you right here in the snippets. I do believe that this is the last thing that we'll have to copy. We'll see. And here you can see the entire file, which you can copy. And we're going to paste it within components, editor, plugins. And then here you can create a new file called floating toolbar plugin.tsx. And you can paste it right here. It is a longer file, but you'll notice that there is an MIT license right here, which means that we can freely use this code. So now we can import it at the top by scrolling up and saying import floating toolbar plugin from /plugins / floating toolbar plugin. Great. So let me show you what that does. And at the same time, you'll be able to see all of the other changes that we implemented. If we can get rid of this loading. I think that loading is there because we haven't actually used the Liveblocks plugin yet, so it's waiting for us to initialize it. And right here below this dynamic block, we can add the Liveblocks plugin, which wraps all of the other functionalities like comments or the collaborator list or the floating composer that you can put in here. So for now, let's just put that here, and later on, we'll add all of these additional functionalities as well. So if I go back, finally, we can see our editor. I'm just gonna reload one more time for good measure. And would you look at that? We can enter some text right here. And now when you hover, you also have this little icon that will soon enough allow you to add comments to each specific character, word, sentence, or a paragraph. So to make this little button do a lot of work, we can go back to our code and then add the floating composer component from Liveblocks lexical. We can give it an additional class name of w-350 pixels. And below it, we can also render the floating threads, which is another plugin, which needs to have access to all of the thread comments. And how can we get all of those comments? Well, it'll be pretty simple. Just at the top, say const destructure the threads and say is equal to use threads like this. And that's coming from Liveblocks React Suspense. So now we can just say threads is equal to threads right here. Let's check it out. Going back to the browser, if I select and click it, now you see this nice looking interface that allows us to write a comment. Instead of test, write something good. And we just left a comment. Now, if you click on this, you can see that JavaScript Mastery left a comment just now. And there's many different things that you can do on this comment, such as mark it as resolved, add a reaction, like a smiley face right here, even edit it and delete it. So we have full CRUD functionalities. Of course, I don't even have to mention that other people can also reply to that thread saying something like, nah, I don't feel like it. Okay, I'm just messaging myself here, but you get the idea. You have floating comments, which you can expand into threads and reply to different comments and even emote to them. This was super simple to implement, but you can see how much functionality does it immediately bring to the table. And to exit out of it, you can just double press on the word and then click outside of the screen. That's it. And if you just want to open it, you go somewhere else right here on the text. And I think that is good. Perfect. Now let's add sticky comments to the right side. We can do that by creating a new custom component in our components folder. And we can call it comments.tsx. Here we can run refce. And here we'll do a similar thing that we have done before. We'll just say const, and we want to get access to all of the threads, meaning all of the existing comment threads. And we'll say that's equal to use threads coming from Liveblocks React Suspense. Inside of here, we will return a div with a class name equal to comments container. And we will return a composer that allows you to write a comment coming from Liveblocks React UI with a class name equal to comment composer. And below it, we have to map over all of the threads. So we can say threads.map, where we get each individual thread. And for each one, we automatically return something known as a thread wrapper. Okay, and this is a component that we will create. So let's pass it a key equal to thread.id and the actual thread equal to thread. So now right above, we can create this new component, const thread wrapper, which accepts a new thread, and that'll be of a type thread wrapper props, and it will simply return a thread. And that's coming from Liveblocks React UI, but of course we will modify it a bit. We have to pass it the thread information equal to thread, and we have to figure out whether this thread is active or not, like when we click it. So we can get access to that state by saying const is active is equal to use is thread active coming from Liveblocks lexical, and to it we pass the thread ID. Now with that, we can modify the data state by saying if is active, give it the active state, else we can simply say something like null. Then we can give it additional class names by using the cn property class name from libutils, and always it will have the comment, thread, and border styles, and only if it is active, so active and, we can give it important border blue 500 and a shadow of medium, and only if the thread is resolved, so thread.resolved, then we will lower the opacity by giving it the opacity of 40. Okay, so now we're exporting these comments that map over the thread wrappers, which means that we can go back to our editor and we can add the comments as another plugin coming from /comments. If we save this and go back to the editor, would you look at that? Now, even this floating comment appeared on the right side, which is great. I mean, we can still open it right here, but it is convenient to be able to resolve it from the right side. See how the opacity fades if you do resolve it. And what we can do now is also add general comments about the document. For example, this is a great document. And now it is not attached to a specific word, sentence, or paragraph. It is attached to the document itself, and you can still reply to this comment thread right here and even add some emojis. Great. So with that, we already have a lot of collaborative functionalities. Remember, when another person joins, we can see a live collaborator list. We have the floating comments as well as general comments on the right side. And another thing which you might think we don't already have yet is the live cursor showing us where another user is typing. We've gotten that as soon as we wrap our initial config with the Liveblocks config. Let me show you. We first have to go back to home and use this second document we have created because that one has the permissions for everyone to access. Now I will copy this URL, open up another browser, and paste it right here. As you can see, both of us are online now. And if I start typing something on this end, oh, and this is interesting. On the right side, you can now see the view only property, as this user cannot currently type or edit this text. Very soon, we'll dive deeper into permission sharing and allowing other users to edit. But for now, we can make the right one watch. So as you can see, JavaScript Mastery is editing the text in real time right here. And as soon as I bold something or even add a floating comment, check this out. In real time, that comment is added right here, and I can now reply to this thread. I don't know why I'm yelling, but here it is. And we can leave some emojis as well. So everything is working flawlessly in real time. And even if I go ahead and resolve the thread, you can see that happens on the right side as well. Wonderful work so far. Another great thing we can do is add the mentions. So now if I try to mention somebody, it's not really gonna work, right? If I try to say Adrian, nothing happens. But I'll show you how to mention other people and make them get notifications on their end when they're mentioned. So let's focus on adding the mentions next. To add the mention functionality, we'll have to navigate over to the provider. And here we have this resolve users part, which helps us with the live collaborators. But now we have to figure out which users are in which rooms so that we know who we can mention. We can do that by saying resolve mention suggestions. And that's going to be an async function that accepts a text and a room ID. And we can open up a new function block. And here we want to fetch all the room users by saying await and call the get document users, meaning the users that belong to a specific document like this. I'm going to comment it out for now because we haven't yet created a server action that allows this. So let's navigate over to users actions, and right below the get clerk users, we'll export const the get document users, which is another async server action that accepts a couple of things as props: the room ID, the current user, and the text. And we can define the type by saying room ID is of a type string, current user is of a type string as well, and the text is of a type string. And then we can open up a new function block right here. You know the drill. In every server action, we open up a try and catch block. In the console log, we can say something like error fetching document users. And in the try, we can get access to the room information by saying await Liveblocks dot get room. And we can pass in the room ID. Once we have the room, we have to get access to the users within that room by saying const users is equal to object.keys, and then get the keys from room users accesses. And we want to filter it out by saying .filter by email, where the email is not the current user. So we want to get all the other users that we might want to mention. So we're not going to mention ourselves. Next, if the text.length exists, meaning if we're trying to mention somebody, then we need to transfer that over into lowercase text. So we can say const lowercase text is equal to text.toLowercase. And then we want to filter out the users by that. So let's filter out those users by saying const filtered users is equal to users.filter, where we take in an email of a type string and then filter it by saying email.toLowercase dot includes lowercase text. So first, we're filtering ourselves out, and then we're trying to filter to see which specific user we want to mention. And now within here, we can return parse stringify the filtered users. And if there's no text we're searching, we can recommend to mention any user. So we can here return parse stringify just the users. I hope that makes sense. So now going back to the provider, we can say const room users, call the get document users, and to it, we need to pass the information that we declared. So we can pass in the room ID, we can pass the current user, which is equal to clerk user dot email addresses 0 dot email address, and we can add an exclamation mark at the end because we know it'll be there, and we can pass the text. Finally, the room users. And I just noticed that I don't yet have the access to the clerk user, so we can fetch it right here at the top by saying const user, which we can rename to clerk user, is equal to use user coming from clerk Next.js. Great. And you can notice here at the end, I have a typo. It's just email address. Great. So now Liveblocks should know which users are we allowed to mention. And going back to our application, we can give it a shot by adding one new comment, and we can try using the mention functionality and then start typing their name. Now you'll see that it doesn't work just yet, and there's a reason for it. It doesn't work because technically we have no collaborators on this document. Yes, there was an Adrian here before, but that's just because we mocked the permissions of this document so everyone can access it. But they're not technically collaborators. That's something we'll implement once we add this amazing share modal, where you'll be able to invite different people to be editors or viewers on your documents. But for the time being, all of the other real-time collaborative features are fully working. So what we'll do next is ensure that our application is enterprise ready. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you have live collaborative features and many users working on the platform at one time, you have to make sure that everything just works. Or if it breaks for whatever reason, that you can fix it very quickly. So in the next step, I'll teach you how to monitor your application for bugs and errors through Sentry. To get started with adding Sentry to our application, click the special link down in the description so you can follow along and see exactly what I'm seeing, and then click Get Started or Sign In if you have used it before. And you'll be redirected to either the onboarding or your issues dashboard. I mean, take a look at how convenient this is to see all the errors that are happening within your application. There's a lot of events in the apps that I am testing right now, and that's such a good thing to be able to see which is the most common error that users are experiencing, how often is it happening, and just be able to fix it very quickly, right? This is amazing. On the other hand, if you haven't used Sentry before, what we can do is go to the URL bar and just append the onboarding right after your Sentry dashboard ID. So we can say onboarding right here and press enter, and that'll allow us to connect Sentry to yet another project, in this case, our live collaborative application. So let's go ahead and click install Sentry. Next, we'll choose Next.js as our platform of choice and click configure SDK. And it's gonna give us a command to install Sentry. So let's copy it. And going back to our application, we can just paste that command in the terminal on the right. Let's press Y to install the Sentry wizard, and it's gonna ask us a couple of questions. We're gonna say yes, the wizard can create and update the files, and we'll be using the Sentry SaaS version of Sentry, but you can also self-host it if you want to. We already have a Sentry account, so I'll press yes, and this will very conveniently log us in. Now you can choose the Sentry project on which you want to add this application to. In my case, I'll go with JavaScript Next.js. And now it's going to install all the necessary dependencies for Sentry to run. Now it's going to ask us a couple of questions. The first one is, do you want to route Sentry requests in the browser through Next.js server to avoid ad blockers? This is a great thing to add and very convenient, but in this case, I'll say no, just because we're testing things out. It's asking us whether we want to create an example Sentry page to test our setup. This is recommended, so we'll say yes. Next, it's asking us whether we're using a CI/CD tool. We're gonna say yes because we're using Vercel. And then it's gonna give you an env key. So let's copy it. And even though it'll make it work by itself, we'll have to copy this and add it later on to our deployed version of the application. So let's quickly navigate to .env.local, and let's paste this new key right here. just so we have it. And we'll say, yes, I configured it. That's it. Sentry Next.js SDK has been successfully installed. Now we just have to validate our setup by restarting our dev environment and then visiting the Sentry example page. We can quickly check the files and folders that have been generated by Sentry. In this case, the most important one is under Sentry example page and then page.tsx. Weirdly enough, to onboard using this tool, we have to trigger an error. So you'll notice that you have to click a button that will purposefully throw an error so that we can catch it within Sentry's dashboard. Other than that, Sentry also added a couple of other things like the Sentry client config, the edge config, and the server config as well. We can look into those later on. For now, let's throw that error. We can do that by going to the homepage and then manually appending this to the URL, Sentry-example-page. If you go there, you can see this nice Sentry throw error. So let's do just that. I'll throw the error, and you can see it right here, Sentry example frontend error. Now, back in Sentry's dashboard, at the bottom of the page, you can see error received, and we can be taken to our error. For you, this should be the only error that's on there, and you can see it right here happening just now. So you can click it, and here you can see all the different information about the error. This error was triggered through one event by one user, and it is of a high priority. So what is some of the information that we can see about this error? Well, let's scroll down and let me show you. We can see exactly where the error originated, and we can see an entire session replay of a user triggering that error. So if I start playing it, you can see exactly when the error happened. That's great. And as you can see, the characters currently are blurred. That's to protect the user's privacy, but you can still get an idea of what they were doing on your site to be able to break it. No more long conversations with users and trying to decipher what they did. You can see exactly what they did right here. And Sentry even implemented some AI solutions to fix these errors, but I like how they say that you might get lucky, but again, maybe not. Still, it's worth a shot. So if you click View Suggestion, you can see a complete problem description and even a proposed solution to fix it. In this case, the fix of the error is to just remove this throw new error from the code. Moving down, we have even more information about why this error might have happened, such as the browser's name, the device, the environment, and even the URL on which it happened, and more information about a specific user, such as devices, versions of React, operating system. The amount of information you're getting here is pretty crazy. The next amazing thing I want to show you is the traces feature. It is still new, but it gives you some amazing insights into your application. You can see here that I'm getting a lot of information as I also have other apps attached to this project. But if we go under the last hour, you should be able to see what I am seeing here. And that is this one, Get Sentry Example Page, the error that we have just thrown. And you can see more information about how that error happened. But what we can do to trace the steps even more is trigger a new event directly in our application. So if I go back to localhost 3000, and if I create a new blank document, you can see that it got created. We can even change the title to something like Testing Sentry. Oh, let's fix that. It's nice how we have this save thing. Very soon after making that request, you should be able to see a trace route pointing to documents and then the ID of this newly created document. If you expand it, you'll be able to see that this is not just a GET request to get that specific document. You can see that we have a POST request here too that was used to create it. So what we can do is we can open up this entire trace, which will lead us to the Performance tab. And here we can see exactly what was happening on the user's browser. And you can trace it request by request. We can see that some middleware events were called as well as some HTTP server, and then finally the navigation happened. What we can do is scroll a bit down and you can see the entire replay once again. So if I go here under replay and click play, you can see exactly what happened. So I click it and then we were redirected right here. All the events are being tracked right here at the bottom. So we have a user click and then what exactly that user click achieved. Okay, that's great. And we can track many more things, such as the breadcrumbs to see the full user journey right here, how the navigation happened, more user clicks, and then once again, a re-navigation. At any time, you can see the console that the user was seeing at that time, which is super helpful. You don't have to ask them for any screenshots. You can also see the network tab right here. You can see the errors and then the entire trace, which we have seen not that long ago. This is great. There's also the accessibility, which is a new thing currently in alpha. This helps you with button names and image attributes. But I think you get the idea. Like, you can literally see everything that is happening in your application and not just see it in real time by browsing this dashboard. The thing is that you'll be getting emails and notifications whenever you like and whenever real issues happen so that you or your team can quickly fix them. We can also check out some of the other features, such as performance. And here you can see the performance score of your entire application. For you, this should be significantly better, or maybe it's still loading. For me, this is a collection of many different applications. If I switch it to last 24 hours, you'll be able to see much more information right here. There's also a thing for user feedback where you can add a little chat window at the bottom right where you can collect that feedback. And there's also things such as dashboards where you can see more information about what's happening on your application. The LCP and FCP, page load times, and top issues over time. But hey, how do we track some of the live features that we have added to our application? Well, let's first trigger some. I will enter some text right here, and I will try to add one floating comment right here, saying floating comment. I will also try to mess with that comment a bit more by adding some kind of emojis and replying to this thread. And I will also add one regular comment on the right side. So regular comment right here. And I will mark it as resolved. So now let's see what's happening on Sentry's side. Now, if you go back to the traces part of Sentry's dashboard, you'll see a trace route that says /documents/ and then an asterisk here. I think this is the one that tracks all the happenings on our editor page. So if you go here, you'll see a lot of things happening. The starting ones right here are from when we first created this document, but the ones below that you see here on the right side are the new events that we're making. For example, if you click on this first HTTP server one, and I can enlarge this just a bit, and if you scroll down, you should be able to see a replay of what this trace is all about. And this one specifically was about us typing text in the form. So that was an event. Then after that, we can go a bit down to some middleware event right here. And if you scroll down, you'll see that this one was regarding adding a Liveblocks floating comment. So you can see here that we expand it, we type something in, and we submit it. If I go to this HTTP server post with documents ID right below the original middleware Next.js, we can see the actual replay, but even more than that, we can see the breadcrumbs that led to this trace. And you can see exactly what is happening. Liveblocks is calling the API Liveblocks room to get it, and this gives us access to the comment that we just posted. You can get pretty deep into this stuff, but that's something that you can explore on your own. This truly is a dev tool that will help you make your apps enterprise ready, secure, testable, and without any errors. I just wanted to show it to you, so if you want to, you can then test it further on your own. With that said, we can resolve these comments, and we can go back to our application to focus on the thing that I know you've been looking forward to. And that is the share modal alongside all the functionality that we need to implement to make the sharing work. This will have a lot to do with permissions, with the editing access, viewing access, and so much more. So let's make it happen. To get started working on the share modal, let's head over to our components folder and create a new component called share modal.tsx, run RAFCE right within it, and let's use it within our collaborative room. So if you go above the editor, still within the header, because that's where we want to activate it, we can go below the active collaborators and we can call the share modal component. It's a self-closing component to which we can pass the room ID equal to room ID to know the access to which room are we sharing. We're going to have the list of active collaborators on there, which is going to be equal to user. We need to have the creator ID so we know who is sharing this access, and we can get that from room metadata.creator ID. And we need to know whether the user even has the permission to share it, and we can get access to that by checking the current user type. Great. Now we can head over to the share modal, and we can accept all of these props by getting the room ID, the collaborator, creator ID, and the current user type. And those will be of a type share document dialog props. Great. So now we have defined that, and we can start declaring some states which we'll need to make this modal happen. The most important one, of course, is the open. So use state snippet, and we'll call it open, as well as set open at the start set to false. We'll use this to track whether the modal is opened or closed. Next, we have to import this from React, and let's immediately turn this into a use client component because we'll have some interaction with states and keyboard and mouse. While we're here, we can also add the loading state. So let's open up the state snippet and say loading, and set loading at the start set to false. And as I said already, we'll have to have the information about which user is trying to make that change, is trying to change the permissions. So we can get access to that by saying const user is equal to use self, coming from Liveblocks React suspense. And here we also have to declare a state for the user type. And then we have to get access to the email of the user we're trying to add. So that's going to be an email state at the start set to an empty string. And once we have the new email state, we have to have the state to decide which type do we want to give to this user. Is it a viewer type or an editor type? So we can call that user type. And at the start, it'll be set to viewer, and it'll be of a type user type, like this. Great. On the way, we'll also have to have a handler function to share the document. So we can create it right away by saying const share document handler is equal to an async arrow function, which for now we can leave blank. And now we can focus on the JSX part of things, where we can show this nice looking dialog. For that, we'll use a chat.cn dialog, a window overlaid on the primary window. Here's an example. We click it and it opens up. So we first need to install it by saying npx chat.cn UI latest add dialog. So back in our code, you can paste that right here, press enter, and it'll install it. Once you install it, we can copy its usage and paste it right here at the top. And we can then copy the actual dialog component, which we can use to replace this div right here. And we can indent it properly. Now to this dialog, we can pass an open state, which we already have in our states, as well as the onOpen change, which will be equal to our setter function setOpen. In the dialog trigger, we won't simply say open, rather we will render a complete button, and within the button, we will render an image. So let's import the button from UI button, and let's import the image from next image. To that image, we can pass a source equal to /assets /icons /share.svg. We can give it an alt tag of share, a width of about 20, a height of about 20, and a class name equal to min-w-4, and on medium devices, size of 5. Right below that image, we can render a p tag that will have a class name equal to margin right of 1, hidden, and then on small devices and larger, block. So it's hidden only on extra small. And here we can have the text that'll say share. Now, if you open up a document, you should be able to see this share button on top. But let's style it further. I'll style it by giving this button a class name of gradient-blue, flex, age of 9, and a gap of 1 alongside a padding x of 4. We can also give it a disabled property. So we'll say disabled if the current user type is not equal to the editor, then we cannot press that button. In this case, we are the editor, so we can click it. But as you can see, this doesn't look so good right now. So let's modify the content. We can do that by finding the dialog content and giving it a class name of shad-dialog. Next, we can style the header by changing the text in the title of something like manage who can view this project. And in the description, we can say something like select which users can view and edit this document. And we can save it. Now, if you go back, this looks so much better. But now we want to go below it and we actually want to form an input where we can add an email address of the person which we want to invite. And we can do that within the content right below the header by forming a label. And this is a component which we have to install. So let's go right here, and alongside dialog, let's also add a label. Press enter and install it. And then you'll be able to import it from UI label. Alongside the label, we'll also need an input. So go ahead and install the input as well, and we'll use it soon. For now, let's give an HTML4 property so we know what this label is for of email, and a class name equal to margin top of 6 and text-blue of 100. And we can say email address right here. Right below it, we can create a div which will serve as the container for our input. So let's give it a class name of flex, items-center, and a gap of 3. Right within it, we can have another container div with a class name equal to flex, flex-1, and rounded-md with a bg dark of 400. And right within it, we can have our self-closing Shadcn input component, which we can import from ./UI/input. We can give it an ID equal to email, a placeholder equal to enter email address, and a value equal to email, because we have already created that state above. We can also specify the onChange, which is going to be a callback function where we set the email to be equal to e.target.value. And finally, we can give it a class name of share-input. If you did that properly, you can go back and now you should be able to see this beautiful email field. But now next to this email field, we have to choose whether we want to give the user view or edit permissions. So that means that we have to add another custom selector component right below the input. Let's go to components and create it right here by calling it user type selector.tsx. Run RAFCE and then import it right here below the input by saying user type selector. And we can automatically pass it a couple of things, such as the user type, which is equal to user type, as well as the set user type equal to set user type. So that way we can control what we're doing from inside of this component. Let's quickly accept those props right here at the top, such as the user type, set user type, and in some other cases, we'll also pass it the onClick handler. And that'll be of a type user type selector params. Inside of here, we want to create a typical select element. And for that, we'll of course use Shadcn. So let's search for select. And you can see that this is a simple select. You just click it and it's selected. So let's install it by copying this command, pasting it in the terminal, and then we can copy its usage, paste it right at the top, and also copy the component and override the div. If we do that and save it, it's going to look something like this, which is not perfect, as you can see. But with a bit of styling, we'll make it look so much better. But first of all, let's give this select a value equal to user type. And we also have to give it an onValue change. So what's going to happen once the value changes? And that's a callback function where we get the type which is of a type user type. And then we want to call a special function called access change handler, to which we can pass the type. This is a function which we can declare right above const access change handler, which accepts the type. And then what it does is simply calls the set user type as well as on click handler, to which we pass the type. This is the special proper passing, and I'm going to explain later on exactly what it does. For now, just know that we have to set the user type as well as pass it to the click handler function. Moving down, we can style the trigger by giving it a class name of shad-select. We don't need a placeholder value here for the value. We can style it by giving it a class name of border-none and bg dark of 200. And now we can further style the select item. I will only leave one, give it a value of viewer, and a class name of shad-select-item, and the text will say can view. We can now duplicate this, change the value to editor, and say can edit. Perfect. Going back, take a look at how nice this looks like. We can enter our email address right here, and then we can select whether we're viewing or editing. Which permissions are we giving to this user? So now we can go back to the share modal, and now that we have the input that allows us to share it, let's also add a button. Right below this div, I'll create a button of a type is equal to submit with an on-click property of share document handler and a class name similar to a share button. So that's going to be a gradient of blue, flex, h-full, gap of 1, and a padding x of 5, which if it's loading can say something like sending ... else it can say invite. And we can also give it a disabled state. If it's loading, it can be disabled just so we cannot click it multiple times. So going back, this is looking absolutely perfect. Now below this div right here, we can create another div inside of which will show all of the collaborators that we have already invited. So taking a look at the design, this is what we have right now. And this right here is what we need to do next to show everybody and their permissions. So let's give this div a class name equal to margin y of 2 and space of y2 to create some space, and an unordered list with a class name equal to flex-call. And right within it, we want to map over all the collaborators. So we can say collaborators.map, where we get each individual collaborator. And for each one, we automatically return a new component, which we'll create called collaborator, like this. So let's immediately create it right here in the components folder. That's going to be collaborator.tsx, where you can run RAFCE, and we can now import it from /collaborator. And back in our app, you can see only one collaborator. That's us, the owner. But that means that it's working. To this collaborator, we'll pass a lot of things. We'll pass a key equal to collaborator.id, a room ID equal to room ID, a creator ID equal to creator ID, an email equal to collaborator.email, and the entire collaborator itself equal to collaborator, alongside the user equal to user.info. So we have everything we need inside of here, and we can use it within the props. So let's accept these props right here. We have the room ID, the creator ID, the collaborator, the email, and the user. And those are of a type collaborator props. In this case, we'll also have to know of which type is which user. And here we'll also be able to modify the type, that is viewer or editor, for the users that we already have in here. So we'll also need another use state, which will be called user type. Set user type. At the start, set to collaborator dot user type, Or if that doesn't exist, we can simply say viewer. Let's import the use state from React, and we'll also need some kind of a loading state right here. So let's create a new loading, set loading, at the start set to false. And of course, we'll have to have some kind of a function here because this is where the magic happens, where we share the document. So I can create const share document handler, which is equal to an async function that accepts the type that we want to provide the access to of a type string. And we'll implement the logic for that very soon. We also want to have another function, so I'll duplicate this one, that'll be called remove collaborator handler. So I'll say remove collaborator handler. And this one will take the email of the person which we want to remove the access for. Great. So now we can focus on JSX to actually show those people on the screen. Keep in mind, we are inside of an unordered list, so each one of these elements will actually be a list item. This list item will have a class name equal to flex, items-center, justify-between, gap of 2, and padding y of 3. Within it, we can have a div with a class name equal to flex, gap of 2, and within it, we can render an image that will show their avatar. So let's import this image right here and give it a source equal to collaborator.avatar with an alt tag equal to collaborator.name, a width of about 36, a height of about 36 as well, and a class name of size-none, and a rounded-full property. If we save it and go back, you can see a nice looking JSM logo right here, as currently we're the only collaborator, that's just ourselves, me, myself, and I, and we're the owner at the same time. But good that we can show something here. So let's go below this image and create another div. And within that div, create a p tag that'll render the collaborator.name. And we can also style it further by giving it a class name of line-clamp-1, text-small or SM, font-semi-bold, leading-4, and text-white. So here we're showing the name. And just next to that name, we want to have a span element where we can check if we are loading. And if we are, we can render a string that says updating ... Remember that thing when we're saving the document title? Well, this is a similar thing. So here we can give it a class name, make it small, like text-10-regular, padding left of 2, and text-blue-100. So if we want to remove somebody's permissions or just change them, we'll be able to see updating. Below this p tag, we can create another p tag that'll have a class name of text-sm, font-light, and text-blue-100. So let's fix this typo right here. And it'll render the collaborator.email. Great. We can go 2 divs down, and here we can show the owner, okay? So we can say creator ID is equal to collaborator.id, and that's going to mean that we are the owner. So here we can say a p tag with a class name equal to text-sm and text-blue-100, and it can simply say owner. Else we can have a div where we can then remove or change permissions. So let's wrap that in a div with a class name of flex and items-center. Here we can render the same user type selector that we have already had, to which, as you might know, we need to pass a couple of props, such as the user type equal to user type as user type, set user type, which will be the set user type function, or just a string of viewer, and the on-click handler. So what will happen once we click it? We want to share the document handler, okay? So once we go ahead and click here, we want to actually run the function that will update those permissions for real this time. So this is why this onClick handler is connected right here. And right below that, we can have a button. Of course, we have to import it first from UI button with a type is equal to button, and then onClick, where we simply call a callback function where we can say remove collaborator handler, to which we pass the collaborator dot email to know which one to remove, and then we have to just say remove. So you can see how this looks like when finished. We have the owner right here, that's us, so we cannot change our own permissions. But if we had some other users, you would be able to remove them or change their permissions, as you can see on the design. So why am I just saying that? Let's actually make it happen. Well, to be able to see it, we have to implement the logic for sharing the document and removing the collaborator. So you know the drill. Whenever there's some kind of a logic happening, we have to go to actions. In this case, we'll have to go to room.actions.ts, and we'll need to create a new export const update document access, which is going to be equal to an async function that accepts a couple of props: room ID, email, user type, and updated by. We need all of that info to properly update the document access, and that's of a type share document params. Let's properly close it and open up a try and catch block. You know the drill. In the catch, we will simply console.log error happened while updating a room access, and in the try, we'll try to make the logic happen. So first, we have to form user accesses by saying const users accesses like this. Make sure that it is plural with the S, of a type room accesses is equal to an object where the key will be dynamic and it'll be of a type email, and we have to call the get access type coming from /utils, to which we pass the user type. And just to satisfy TypeScript, we can say as access type like this. So this contains a list of all of the user accesses. And then once we have that, we just want to update a room by saying const room is equal to await Liveblocks.update room, to which we pass the room ID. And as the second parameter, we provide an object with the updated users accesses. So that's going to look something like this. Next, if we have a room, so if room, that means that we can trigger a notification. So this is something we'll do very soon. To send a notification to the invited user. Finally, we want to revalidate the path, specifically the document's room ID, so we can change the share modal, and then we can return parse stringify the new updated room information. And while we're here, what do you say that we also implement the functionality for removing a user? We can do that by creating a new export const remove collaborator is equal to an async function where we have a room ID and an email. That's going to be of a type. A room ID is of a type string, and the email is of a type string as well. And we open up a try and catch block. In the catch, we console.log error happened while removing a collaborator. But in the try, we can try to fetch the information about the room by saying const room is equal to await liveblocks.getRoom, to which we pass the room ID like this. Once we get the room, we can make a check whether the email that we have there matches. So if room.metadata.email is triple equal to the email that we're trying to remove, we're going to throw an error saying that you cannot remove yourself from the document. As you're the owner, you're the only person who can modify permissions, you cannot remove yourself. Else, we're going to say const updated room is equal to await liveblocks.update room. We pass in the room ID and we pass the user accesses by removing the access for that specific email. Finally, we revalidate the path and return parse stringify the updated room. I hope this makes sense. As you can see, it's getting more and more, not repetitive, but it follows a specific structure, which is always good. So now if we go back, we can implement those server actions within corresponding function handlers. So in the share document handler, we can set the loading to be true at the start, and then we can set it to false at the end. As a matter of fact, we can do the same thing for removing the collaborator, and within it, we can say await update document access, which you need to import from utils. And now we need to pass the room ID, the email, the user type of a type user as user type. This is just for TypeScript, and the updated by, where we can pass the user right here. Let's actually spread this into multiple lines. It might be a bit easier to understand what's happening. So we have a room ID, email, user type, and finally the updated by property. And we can do a very similar thing for removing the collaborator. So that's going to be await remove collaborator, which we need to import from actions, and then passing the room ID and the email. Great. So what do you say that we give it a shot? Oh, but don't forget, if we're going to actually test this for real, we have to see where we added a to-do for ourselves to play with permissions. So we have a delete button right here. We have one for, there we go. Good thing that I left it to do for myself. It says bring this back when we have the permission system in place. This is exactly what I wanted to see. So now we'll actually look into the access of the user that we're inviting. Great. And if you didn't leave a to-do for yourself, this is just under room actions, line about 40, where you can delete that as well or uncomment it. So now if we go back, I am currently logged in with javascriptmastery00@gmail.com, and I'll try to invite my alter ego of contact at jsmastery.pro. And let's say that I want to give them the edit permissions as well. And I'll click invite. In this case, it looks like not much happened. Even if I reload the page and go to share, we're still alone here. So why is nothing still happening when I click it? If I go back, I mean, I really did add a handler to this select. Oh, but we are not playing with select here. We're working with the invite button. So if we go to search and search for invite, you'll see that we're using it here on this button of a type submit that has a share document handler. And this one is completely empty. This one is in the share modal functionality right here. So here we have to do exactly the same thing that we have done in the other share handler. Let's see where it is. It is this one. So let's just copy what we have here and paste it inside of here as well. Import the update document access. And in this case, the type is a user type, which is stored in the state. The updated by will be user.info. Great. So now if we go back, we can try to truly invite contact at jsmastery.pro. And there we go. For a second, you are able to see loading. And now we have a remove button, and we can also change the permissions. If I click can view, check this little updating thing. Super cute. And actually, it worked. This is great. Let's see if the changes are reflected on Liveblocks' side. If you go to rooms, and if you find the room that we've been working with, and go under permissions, you can see that contact at JS Mastery Pro and JavaScript Mastery both have the room write access. If we quickly change it to view and go back, you can see that now room read. Oh, this is interesting. So currently it's write, but typically it's read. In any case, this is working great. And I also think we have to fix the default accesses. Yes, this is very important because now we have a complete permission system put in place, and we don't want every user to have write access by default. So let me think about where that was. I think I commented it out. I can search for room write, I think, and we should be able to find it somewhere. I cannot seem to see it like this, but maybe if I search default accesses, there we go. It's in the room actions. And actually this was supposed to be just an empty array right here because we no longer want to give write access by default. Great. So now to truly test this out, let's create one new document from the JavaScript Mastery email called something like my first collab. And let's actually invite contact at jsmastery.pro, and I'll do it as a viewer. and I'll do something like, "Hi, you here?" And now we can see if that shows up on their account. Would you look at that? Notification is not there yet, as we haven't yet implemented that. We will soon. But my first collab, created just about now, is here. We are invited, and as you can see, we have a view-only access, and we can see the same text. We cannot collaborate, but if I quickly go here and modify the access to edit, in real time it actually changed near the title, but we still might to reload just for the editor changes to take effect as well. And now, as you can see, I am typing, and on the left side, you can see the changes. Wonderful. That means that the sharing functionality alongside the full permission system has now been put in place. Great work. Next, I want to add a button that will allow us to delete a document, because here on my real account, we have started gathering so many documents which are not in use, and I like to keep everything tidy. So let's create a simple modal that will allow us to delete a document if we have the permission to do so. To start creating the delete modal, I think we even left a to-do for ourselves right here. And we're now slowly finishing all those to-dos. First the delete button and then the notification functionality. But this to-do is right in our homepage. So here we have to add that delete button. So let's go ahead and create a new component, actually, called delete modal.tsx, where we can run RAFCE, and we can very simply import it right here, delete modal, coming from components delete modal, room ID equal to ID. And now we can implement it. This delete modal is exactly the same, if not even much simpler than the share modal. So I'll simply provide you with the code for it. Go in the GitHub repo, code snippets, copy it, and just paste it right here. You'll notice it's about 50 to 60 lines, primarily just the JSX for the dialog component, which you already know how to do. Right here, we're calling this delete document. That is a server action, which we haven't created yet. So that matters more than just rendering the JSX. So let's navigate over to room actions and let's create a delete document action. We can do that right here below by saying export const delete document is equal to async function, where we have to get the room ID. Room ID is at the same time the document ID. We can open up a try and catch block. In the catch, we can say console.log, error happened while deleting a room. And here, the only thing we have to do is say await Liveblocks.delete room, to which we pass the room ID. Then we want to revalidate the path of homepage, and we want to redirect to the homepage if we're not already there, because we can also delete the document from some other places. So let's import that from navigation. Now, if we go back, we're using this delete modal. Let's make sure that it is properly imported, because it is giving me an issue right here. Delete modal, we're good. And going back to our application, since we're the creator of each one of these documents, we can now delete them as well. So let me try to delete this empty untitled one. We have this nice looking modal, and we can click delete. And there we go, it's gone. As easy as that. Now, we can also use this delete modal right inside of a specific document. So right here, we can add it to the editor. We can do that if we go over to the editor component and then go next to the toolbar plugin. You can see we have already put this code for it before. So we just need to import the delete modal. And if we are the editor, we should be able to see a delete button right here. And if we check if it works, it indeed does. Great. The last thing we can focus on are the notifications. To get started with the notifications, we can head over to our homepage. Right here above the signed in user, we have already left a text, which now we can turn into a component. So let's create a new component called notifications.tsx, where you can run RAFCE, and we can now just import it right here. There we go. Import from components notifications. We can dive into it and start implementing it. For this component, we'll use something known as a popover component from Chat.cn. If you click it, it opens up a popover that displays content in a portal. That's basically it. And this is perfect for displaying some kind of windows like this or displaying notifications. So let's install a popover by running the npx Chat.cn UI latest add popover component. We can copy its usage, paste it right at the top, and copy the component and paste it right here instead of this div. This will be a client-side component, so at the top we can say use client. Back on the homepage, you can see a button that says open, and if you click it, here we can place the content for the popover. So let's do just that. Let's style the trigger just a bit by giving it a class name equal to relative, flex, size of 10, items-center, justify-center, and rounded-lg. And right within it, we can render a notification bell icon in form of an image. Image coming from next image with a source equal to /assets /icons /bell.svg with an alt tag of inbox, a width of 24, and a height of 24. And right next to this image, we want to show how many notifications do we actually have. So for that, we can define the notification count. And thankfully, this will be handled for us by Liveblocks. So first, let's get access to all the inbox notifications by destructuring it and calling the use inbox notifications hook, just like so. Below it, we can get access to the count of the notifications in a similar manner by calling the use unread inbox notifications count. Super simple. And we can also filter out the ones that we read by saying const unread notifications is equal to inbox notifications.filter, where the read at status is not true. So now let's use it right here. If the count is greater than 0, then we can render a div. It'll be a self-closing div, and this will be that little dot that shows you that there is something new happening in there. So it'll be a little absolutely positioned dot with a right 2 and top 2 with a z index of 20, size of 2, rounded of full, and bg blue 500. So if I mock the count right now by saying something like let count is 1, and if I go back, you can see this circle right here. I must have messed up the size, but you get the idea. The size should have actually been size-2 instead of 20. Now that we fixed that, let's focus on the content. So this content will have an align equal to end and a class name equal to shad-popover. And right within it, we can render a new Liveblocks component called Liveblocks UI config, coming from React Liveblocks. And we can further configure it by providing an object called overrides. And here we can say inbox notification text mention. Okay, so we're only triggering the mentions. And in there, we get access to the user, which will be a React node. And we can automatically return an empty React fragment where we say user mentioned you. So this is a pretty simple way to figure out exactly what's happening through a specific notification. Right within it, we can render the inbox notification list coming from Liveblocks React UI. And in there, we can check if unread notifications.length is lower than or equal to 0, then we can render a p tag with a class name equal to padding y of 2, text-center, and text-dark of 500 that'll simply say no new notifications. But if we do have the notifications, we can say that right below. So we can say unread notifications dot length is greater than 0. And in that case, we can map over the unread notifications by saying unread notifications.map, where we get each individual notification. And for each one, we can return a new component called inbox notification coming from Liveblocks React UI. And it'll be a self-closing component, so it looks something like this. To it, we need to pass a lot of additional properties though. First, we'll be mapping over things, so we need to provide a key. And the key will be equal to notification.id. After the key, we need to pass the entire inbox notification itself. We need to provide a class name of bgdark200 and text-white. We can give it an href. So once we click on it, where do we want to go? Well, we want to go to /documents/notification.roomID. So yes, we can do navigation as well. So let's properly fix this. There we go. We can say show actions. Can we do something with that? I'll leave that as false for now. Next, we have the kinds. Okay, so what kinds of notifications do we want to show? And how do we want to display them? Okay, we'll render all kinds of different notifications. So let's do that by saying thread first. So we can render a thread by having a callback function here that gives us access to the props of that specific thread. And then we can render an inbox notification dot thread to which we pass these props, and we can pass additional information such as show actions is false, as well as show room name will also be false in this case. And now we can duplicate this thread right here just below and rename it to text mention. So we want to show notifications for threads and for text mentions, but in this case, we'll render a text mention. And here we can just say show room name false, no need to specify the actions. And finally, the last thing we have here is the $ document access. And here we can also return props. And here we can define how a custom notification would look like by saying inbox notification dot custom like this. In it, we can also spread the props by saying props. We can give it a title, which is equal to props.inbox notification dot, I think it's activities, 0, and then dot data. That's a long one. And then on it, there has to be a dot title. Next, we can add the aside property, meaning what will show aside the notification. That's going to be an inbox notification dot icon. It'll have a class name equal to bg transparent, and within it, we can render an image where we want to show the avatar of the person that left a mention. We can do that by saying source is equal to. We can copy this entire thing for the title, but I'll modify the end to say avatar, or it'll be an empty string right here, just so it doesn't break. And we can say avatar as string. That's going to help TypeScript to make it work. The width will be 36. The height will be 36 as well. The alt tag will be equal to avatar. And finally, the class name will be rounded-full, as it typically is with avatars. Finally, within the actual inbox notification custom, we can render the props.children, so we can show everything we need within it. And now I think we'll have to fix the indentation here. I think I didn't close something properly. Oh, I was missing just one parenthesis here. This was a longer file, so if something doesn't work for you, just let me know. And I will leave this entire file in the README as well, in case you want to just copy it, because we did write a lot of stuff here. And mostly we're using some pre-done Liveblocks component that they conveniently created for us to get a beautiful UI, which I can show you right now. Moving back here, check out this nice bell icon, but there are no new notifications. So I might need to go to my other account. I will enter my first collab document because this account also has it. and I will actually put it side by side so we can see if we get triggered in real time. And now I will add a mention right here for my JavaScript Mastery account and say, hi there. And let's send it. And even though it took about 10 seconds for the notification to appear, here it is. Adrian commented in a thread, hi there. This is great. And if I click it, it's actually going to lead me directly to that document and that comment. Let's test it the other way around. I'm going to write another comment right here and tag Adrian. And now if I go back, we're hoping to see a notification appear right here as well. But on this end, we don't have a notification. What we can try to do is create a completely separate comment, like a new one, and then tag Adrian right here and say, hi, you there? And we can see if that works, maybe even adding some kind of an emoji right here. And don't forget, there is one thing that we still have to do, and that is also send a notification whenever we add a new user to the document to let them know that they have been invited. Okay, it's good that we actually see this one. So we can see commented in a thread, hi, you there, and it actually appeared right here. So it's good to know that they're working both ways, and it invites me directly onto the document. So if we quickly go back to the code and search for to do, you'll see that we have left one to do for ourselves, and that is to send a notification to the user when the document gets updated with their email. So here, I'll show you how to trigger a custom notification through Liveblocks. We can do that by saying const notification ID is equal to nano ID. We can do it like this. Once we have the ID of the notification, we can just create it by saying await Liveblocks dot trigger inbox notification, and we can pass all of the different options, such as the user ID, which is their email in this case, the kind of the notification we're sending. In this case, this is a custom notification of document access. Okay, so now going back to our notification component, I think this makes a bit more sense. You can create different kinds of notification elements for different kind of notification types, for threads, text mentions, and even our custom things, such as when you're invited to a new document. Okay, so kind is document access. We can also set the subject ID to be equal to the notification ID, and we can pass all of the activity data, such as the user type. We can pass the title. This is going to be a template string of something like, you have been granted user type access to the document, either viewer or editor. And we can also say by, and then we can say updated by dot name. We can also pass the updated by right here. So updated by dot name. We can pass the avatar equal to updated by dot avatar. And we can pass the email equal to updated by dot email. And finally, we need to pass the room ID as the second parameter to this function call. And these updated by, avatar, and email, you can see that we're getting access to them through props, okay? So we can then show additional things like the data, title, and so on. Great. So now that we have done this, we have no more to-dos to implement. And if I go back, I can try removing the access from contact at JS Mastery Pro. There we go. So this is the first time we're testing that. And I can once again try to share it. And let's see, we're going to give them a viewer access. And back on the homepage, look at that. I see a little blue notification bell. And if I click that, it says you have been granted viewer access to the document by JavaScript Mastery. And if I click it, you can see that we are there. And we can also see that we're here by looking at this live collaborator avatar. How cool is that? And don't forget, this entire project is completely mobile responsive. Even the editor, which is very hard to do with full markdown editing features for it to be fully mobile responsive. So if you go to the home page, everything is looking great. Even the modals, and if you go in, also the share, everything works flawlessly, which means that we came to the end of this phenomenal build, which I really enjoyed. And I hope you did too. So in the typical JavaScript mastery style, the last thing we have to do is deploy it to the internet. So let's do that next. To deploy our project, we'll be using Vercel. So just head to vercel.com and then either sign in or sign up. You should be redirected to your dashboard. And then just add a new project. For this to work, we'll have to put our project in GitHub. So just head over to github.com/new and create a new repository. I'll call it something like JSM LiveDocs. Make it either public or private and click Create Repository. Now we'll have to run a few of these commands. Before we do that though, let's quickly head over to our next.config.js. And here, just at the top of the next config, let's say TypeScript, and then you can add ignore build errors is set to true. We most likely have just 1 or 2 TypeScript warnings there, so we don't want those to ruin our build. Now that we have this, we are ready to push our code to GitHub. So just say git init, git add dot, git commit -m, first commit, git branch m, main, git remote add origin, like this, and then git push u origin main. And in just a couple of seconds, your code will be up right here, and Vercel will automatically notice it. So let's click import. They automatically figure out the name, and we just have to add our environment variables. So let's head to .env.local, and let's copy all of the keys and just paste them right here. You can do that by pressing Ctrl or Command A, then copying it and just pasting it right here, and press deploy. Let's wait a minute until it does its thing, and I'll be right back. And there we go, live and deployed on first try. This doesn't happen often, trust me, especially after building and developing for such a long time and then trying to publish it all at once. But with that said, let's just click continue to dashboard, and on the top right, you can click visit. This is looking amazing. So let's continue with GitHub. And for the time being, I will disable this Vercel deployment toolbar. I'm logging in with my same account, and you can see that the document that I shared with this second account is right here. I can go ahead and create a new document. Everything works well. And as you know, I can invite additional people to it. I don't think I have to show that to you. You know that it works. And don't forget that this is now live and deployed so that you can share this link with everyone, invite them to your documents, and use this app as your own. Maybe even your own documentation site. Who knows? You can definitely include it on your portfolio. And I would even recommend creating a case study out of it. Not only out of this video, but out of the all projects that you create. A case study is a document where you explain your process of challenges you faced, as well as the solutions you implemented and how you came to the final solution. Here, I even give you a complete example and a template for a case study, how you can explain the process, and everything that you need to put in there. This is a part of our new DCA course where I help you accelerate your dev career. And before I forget, we also have weekly meetings where you can speak directly with me and ask me any questions. We just had one 2 hours ago, so it's already counting up for the next one next week. You can check out the DCA course as well as our Ultimate Next.js course on jsmastery.pro. If you loved learning about the revalidation and server-side rendering and so much more stuff, and if you want to really learn how to build proper, well-optimized Next.js applications so that you truly understand how the stuff works behind the scenes, I would highly recommend checking out the Next.js course. Just go to jsmastery.pro. With that in mind, congratulations on coming to the end of this video. I really loved this one, and I hope you did too. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.